Chapter 937. An unprecedented battle seemed to have come to an end. At this time, the cultivators of all sects in China opened their eyes wide in fear and panic. They looked at Li Yundong and the mystical silver fox in the air at a loss. At this time, their fate was in the hands of these two people. At this time, the mystical silver fox fixed her eyes on Li Yundong. She glanced at the desperate cultivators of all sects in China at the foot of the mountain, and suddenly a very cold smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. She said, "If you can kill all these people, I will return Su Chan's soul and body to you." Li Yundong's whole body shook. His fists, which had almost collapsed, clenched again in an instant. He couldn't help looking down and saw a sea of corpses and blood at the foot of the mountain. Many cultivators had fallen in a pool of blood. Although most of the familiar faces, such as Du Fei and Wei Qing, were still there, their eyes were empty at this time, like dead people. Almost all the masters and seedlings in the Chinese cultivation world were gathered here at this time. If they were all dead, the Chinese cultivation world would only exist in name. Then Li Yundong would be the historical sinner of the Chinese nation and the Chinese cultivation world, and he would always be nailed to the pillar of shame. Although Li Yundong could give everything for Su Chan, he still had reason. How could he be so crazy as to kill all these people in order to agree to the conditions of the mystical silver fox? Li Yundong fixed his eyes on the mystical silver fox. He suddenly smiled, and his smile was almost desperate. He said in a hoarse voice, "What the girl used to expect most was that I would become a hero that everyone looked up to. She had always firmly believed that I would become a hero. At that time, even I didn't believe that I would become the person she expected. Even now, I don't know if I will become a hero in the future, but the only thing I know is that if I become a heinous devil, my Choner will definitely be very sad." Li Yundong continued, "When I was angry, I attracted the thunder to kill young Master He. I once asked my Choner, 'Why didn't you stop me?' My Choner said, 'She knows that if she stops me, I will definitely be unhappy. She doesn't want to see me live a sad life in the future. If she attracts a heavenly tribulation because of this, then she can die with me. It's not a big deal." Li Yundong's eyes moved to the cultivators of various sects at the foot of the mountain, and the expression on his face gradually became gentle. "Little girl doesn't want me to live the rest of my life with resentment, and I don't want my Choner to feel sad in the future. So, even if you can fulfill your promise, I don't want Choner to bear the blame because of my mistakes and not smile all day in the future." When the mystical silver fox heard Li Yundong's words, she showed a sarcastic look on her face. She couldn't help sneering loudly and said, "Hypocritical, hypocritical. All lies. You men are selfish. You wouldn't dare to give up everything for her. You've been lying to her from the beginning." The mystical silver fox remembered that thousands of years ago, the reincarnated Wisdom King had deceived her feelings, framed her, and betrayed her. She couldn't help but be angry. If you really care about her and love her so much, do you dare to die for her? Do you dare to exchange a life for a life? If you dare to do this, I will believe what you said, and I will give Su Chan back to you." At this time, there was another rumbling explosion in the sky. The clouds in the sky rolled again, and golden light shone in all directions. The figures of gods and Buddhas could be seen slowly appearing in the clouds one by one. However, Li Yundong didn't seem to notice it at this time. The words of the mystical silver fox made his body tremble slightly. Xueqi and Zi Yuan were so shocked that their faces turned pale at the same time. They shouted in unison, "Don't!" Xueqi moved and rushed toward Li Yundong. "Master, don't listen to her." However, Li Yundong raised his palm, and an invisible force abruptly fixed Xueqi's body in the air. No matter how hard she struggled, she couldn't move at all. At this time, Li Yundong turned his face and looked at Xueqi and Zi Yuan with some regret and shame. Then he looked at Wan Hongling and Lin Miao apologetically, as well as Ding Nan, who had been standing aside like a wooden chicken. Li Yundong reluctantly withdrew his gaze from them. He said slowly, "I'll pay back what I owe you in this life in my next life. In this life, I have to pay other people's debts first. I'm sorry." Boom! As soon as Li Yundong's voice fell, the clouds in the sky split open, and countless golden lights shone on the ground. The golden-stepped jade platform, the old ancestors of the three pure ones, the auspicious clouds, the lotus flowers, and the gods and Buddhas appeared again. Li Yundong raised his head and looked at the gods and Buddhas who had appeared again after being dispelled by him. He knew that today's game would not end until he died. He looked at the mystical silver fox with despair and sadness in his eyes and said, "Mystical silver fox, you must remember what you said and keep your promise. If you go back on your word, please escape from here. You must treat my Choner well. She is greedy and likes to eat delicious food. You must give her more delicious food. Her master, you can't cook delicious food for her in the future." After that, Li Yundong used all his strength to raise his palm and hit the top of his head hard. No! At this moment, Xueqi let out an extremely shrill scream. She saw Li Yundong slap his palm on the top of her head. In an instant, countless rays of light in her body scattered in all directions. Li Yundong's Jin Shenyang spirit was smashed by himself, and in an instant, it dissipated completely and disappeared between heaven and earth. Only Li Yundong's body was slowly falling from mid-air, bit by bit. Xueqi's eyes turned black and her body fell back. Zi Yuan appeared on the ground in an instant and caught Li Yundong. Tears kept welling up in her eyes, but she didn't seem to notice it. Her 5 fingers quickly pointed at the vital acupoints on Li Yundong's body, and she crazily injected her zhenqi into Li Yundong's body. However, when she probed with her zhenqi, she felt that Li Yundong's body was empty, as if there was nothing left. Everything seemed to have disappeared like smoke in thin air. Zi Yuan stood there in a daze. She had channeled so much spiritual power and zhenqi that she was a little shaky. At this time, Wan Hongling hugged her while crying and said loudly, "Shiji Zi Yuan, he is dead, he is dead." Zi Yuan couldn't help but turn around and become furious. She slapped Wan Hongling in the face. Zi Yuan said with tears streaming down her face, "He won't die, he won't die." Wan Hongling burst into tears. She hugged Zi Yuan tightly and burst into tears. Zi Yuan seemed to have lost all her strength. She covered her mouth and sobbed. At this time, the mystical silver fox was also standing in the air in a daze. She seemed to be unable to see the gods and Buddhas above her head. She just stared at Li Yundong. The corner of her mouth couldn't help twitching, and she wanted to show a sarcastic smile. She said in a hoarse voice, "Wisdom King, we have been fighting for 1,000 years. I didn't expect you to die like this. You were actually killed by a single sentence from me. Ha 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 ha." The mystical silver fox couldn't help but raise her head and laugh wildly. The invincible Wisdom King was killed by my words. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. But as she laughed loudly, she suddenly felt that her face was hot. She reached out her hand to touch it, and found that sparkling hot tears were continuously flowing down her cheeks. The mystical silver fox raised her hand in shock and looked at the tears on her fingertips, which were reflecting colorful light. She whispered in disbelief, "What am I crying for? What am I crying for? I should laugh. He betrayed me and deceived me back then. Why can't I betray him and deceive him? I should laugh." As the mystical silver fox said these words, the tears in her eyes were like beads with a broken string, constantly dripping down. The mystical silver fox kept wiping her tears with her hands angrily. She shouted nervously, "What are you crying for? What am I crying for?" As she was shouting, suddenly, one picture after another emerged in her mind uncontrollably. On a tree-shaded path, a young man was running happily with a young girl on his back. One of them was amazing, and the other was gentle. In a warm little home, a young man was fighting with a young girl for food on the table. The young girl protected the plate in front of her with her body and looked at the young man with her teeth bared, like a small animal protecting its food. In the amusement park late at night, a young girl was sitting alone on a seat, wiping her tears and choking with sobs. "He doesn't want me anymore. He despises me. No one will love me in the future, and no one will cook delicious food for me." These pictures emerged one after another. The mystical silver fox couldn't help but freeze in place. In her ears, the strange but very familiar pictures kept replaying in her mind. "Whoever dares to touch a hair of my girl, whether you are the Jade Emperor or the Queen Mother of the West, I have one word, beat. Silly girl, no matter what you become in the future, I won't despise you, because you have never despised me. Silly girl, you're already in my heart. How can I not think of you every second? I will definitely become stronger. What is love in the world? It makes people take off their clothes and pants. Do you need me to take off my clothes and pants? You are a pig, you are a pig. Even if all the gods and Buddhas oppose me, I will not leave you. You little demon. Will you leave your master? Mystical Silver Fox. You must keep your promise. If you don't keep your promise, please escape from here. You must treat my Choner well. She is greedy and likes to eat delicious food. The mystical silver fox was shocked and infected by the countless bits and pieces between Li Jiandong and the little fox. She wiped her tears and cried because of the pictures in her mind. When the last picture dissipated in her mind, the tears in the eyes of the mystical silver fox rolled down. She wanted to open her mouth and shout, but when the words reached her throat, they seemed to be choked by something. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't spit them out. Her chest was tumbling. Although Wisdom King was dead, she didn't feel the slightest pleasure of revenge. Instead, a sense of extreme sadness and sorrow enveloped her heart. The mystical silver fox smiled sadly. She murmured to herself in a low voice, "My enemy. If you had treated me with such sincerity in your previous life, it would have been more than this." The tears of the mystical silver fox kept falling. She looked up at the gods and Buddhas in the sky. She smiled and said, "Today, I'm not afraid of you. It's because I, the mystical silver fox, am a person who keeps his promise." The mystical silver fox wiped her tears hard. Her expression became extremely firm and unruly again. She suddenly raised her head and let out an earth-shattering roar. In an instant, a white aura gushed out of her body and quickly spread in all directions between heaven and earth. Then, another gray aura floated out of her body and floated in the air. At this moment, the 9 golden foxtails behind the flirtatious woman slowly disappeared. When she slowly opened her eyes, her blood-red pupils had once again turned into pitch-black pupils. After the mystical silver fox left, Xueqi woke up again. She looked around in confusion and found that not far away, her beloved man was standing there like a stone statue, motionless. Xueqi blinked her eyes. She moved and flew to Li Yundong's side in an instant. She reached out her hand and touched Li Yundong's cheek tentatively and timidly. She shouted in a low voice, "Yundong. It's me. It's your little girl. Your Choner is back. You, open your eyes and have a look. Have a look at your little girl." But at this time, no matter how Xueqi shouted, the invincible reincarnated Wisdom King no longer responded. The old man who had once laughed and played with the little girl did not move at all. At that moment, the world was extremely quiet. Only cries of sorrow and sorrow reverberated in the mountains, resounding in everyone's hearts. Chapter 938. Xueqi's mournful cries were like an invisible hand, squeezing the hearts of everyone. Even the cultivators of the various sects in Zhongri, who had hated Li Yundong's behavior because he had gone against the heaven, were silent at this time, and their hearts were shocked. Even the gods and Buddhas in the sky were silent at this time. After a while, the golden light in the sky sprinkled down, and the sound of Buddha's name echoed in the air. The great ancestors of the 3 pure ones first slowly returned to the cracks in the clouds along the golden-stepped jade platform, and then the gods and Buddhas in the sky disappeared one by one. The figures of Buddha Tathagata, the 4 wisdom kings, the 4 great bodhisattvas, the 500 arhats, and the 3,000 vajras disappeared one by one. When the last figure disappeared, a figure slowly appeared in the air, surrounded by golden light. He sat cross-legged and put his palms together. Everyone looked up and vaguely saw the appearance of Purin. The man said in a clear voice in the air, "Amitabha, put down the butcher's knife and become a Buddha immediately." "Good, good." After he finished speaking, his figure flashed and disappeared into the crack in the clouds. The thick clouds in the sky twisted and rotated, and soon drifted away in all directions. After a while, they disappeared without a trace, as if they had never appeared. The sky was still blue and clear, as if it had been washed. All the cultivation sects in Zhongri looked at the sky in a daze. Many people couldn't believe that all this was over for a while. Zhang Tongtian, the leader of the Qingqing sect, let out a long sigh, turned his head and said to Zhang Huashui, "Let's go. It's time to go back." Zhang Huashui looked at Xueqi and said, "But, Shixiang the fox Zen schooled." Zhang Tongtian shook his head. "Death is like a lamp going out. Since the mystical silver fox has also disappeared, Li Wudi has already given us the best explanation. Let's go." Zhang Huashui stared at Xueqi, who was holding Li Yundong in the air and crying sadly. Even though he was a rough man, he couldn't help but sigh at this time. This son of a bitch is really affectionate. With a wave of his arm, he led the disciples of the Qingqing sect down the mountain. With someone taking the lead, there were soon people following. Ise Chuyun and Ise Shinguang of the Ise Shinto looked at each other. Shinguang shook his head and sighed. I didn't expect the final result to be like this. Ise Chuyun looked at Li Yundong, who was already silent, with a complicated look in her eyes. She sighed softly and said, "What is love in the world? It's only love in life." Ise Chuyun raised her head and stared blankly at the sky for a while. Then she said faintly, "Shinguang Jun, let's go. It's time to go back." As soon as the two of them took the lead and left, the Japanese cultivators also cleaned up the battlefield and collected the corpses, preparing to leave. At the foot of the mountain, some of them were crying as they gathered the corpses of their friends and relatives together. Some were chanting the rebirth mantra to release the souls of the dead. All kinds of sounds were coming from the foot of the mountain. It was very noisy. On the other side, the sound seemed to have been cut off. Su Chan, Zi Yuan, and the others didn't seem to be able to hear it. Especially Su Chan, tears streaming down her face. She kept calling Li Yundong's name in a low voice, as if she was eager for him to open his eyes in the next second. Ruan Hongling and Lin Miao also cried silently. As soon as Li Yundong fell down, it seemed that the whole sky had collapsed. Although the sun was shining brightly above their heads, it was as if they were in an ice house in the harsh winter. In front of them, it was as if there was nothing but darkness and no light. Lin Miao walked to Su Chan's side and reached out to pull her sleeve, but her hand froze in the air. She said in a low voice, "Don't cry. If Master knew that you were so sad, he would be even more sad." Hearing this, Su Chan wiped the tears on her cheeks. She smiled sweetly and said with tears in her eyes, "You're right. Yundong doesn't like me crying, so I have to smile. I have to smile." She said it with a smile, but the tears in her eyes kept falling like pearls from a broken string. She wiped them away and smiled. Then she said to Li Yundong, "Yundong, you have to wake up quickly. I will be fine. I will wait for you to wake up with a smile, okay?" When Lin Miao and Ruan Hongling heard this, their hearts ached even more. Lin Miao turned around, covered her mouth, and sobbed. At this time, Zhou Qin woke up faintly. As soon as she woke up, she immediately jumped up and rushed to Li Yundong's side like crazy. She stretched out her hands toward Li Yundong, but when she saw Su Chan smiling and wiping her tears in midair, her hands involuntarily froze in place. Zhou Qin was trembling all over. She looked straight at Li Yundong, only to see that his expression was calm, and there was a smile on the corner of his mouth, as if he had just fallen asleep. Zhou Qin only felt as if her internal organs had been torn apart, and the pain was so great that she wanted to die immediately. Zhou Qin's tears flowed down, but her eyes became redder and redder. Her eyes were full of murderous intent and fierce light. She couldn't help turning her head to look at the cultivators of the various sects who had not left yet. She panted for a while with a ferocious face, then suddenly jumped up and rushed toward them. At this time, the calmest among these people was Lin Miao. She had been by Li Yundong's side these days and had also noticed Zhou Qin's love and feelings for Li Yundong. She knew her character better, so she had been paying attention to her, for fear that she would lose control of her emotions and cause a terrible disaster. When Lin Miao saw Zhou Qin turn her head, her eyes were extremely ferocious, and her heart trembled. When Zhou Qin moved, she immediately stood in front of Zhou Qin and said anxiously, "Eldest Shiji, don't go. Do you want everything Master has done to be in vain?" The blue veins on Zhou Qin's forehead bulged, and the blood in her eyes burst open. She shouted, "Get out of my way! If you stand in front of me again, I will kill you too." Lin Miao was not afraid. Instead, she grabbed her hand and said anxiously, "Eldest Shiji, calm down. Master is so powerful. Maybe there is a way to save him. If you are so impulsive, what if he wakes up one day and finds out what you have done? What will he do then?" This sentence hit Zhou Qin's weak spot. Although she knew that Li Yundong had committed suicide, she still hoped that he could wake up in the depths of her heart. The blood in her eyes gradually disappeared, replaced by an incomparably deep sadness. She covered her face and suppressed her surging emotions. She choked and said, "His soul and yang spirit have disappeared. How can he be saved?" At this time, Zi Yuan, who was also like a stone in meditation, trembled all over, and a voice suddenly sounded in her blank mind. "Once Jin Dan appears, the fate of the mortal world is set, and the first thunder is heard to see the truth. The spirit mirror is easy to break. and the immortal sword can't break the red rope. Yunhai sits and looks at old Yunhai, and talks about the wind and dust in front of the stone. Chang'e has no regrets about stealing the elixir. Why should Hong Yang envy Zhang Sheng? This sentence was like a big bell, buzzing in Zi Yuan's mind. At this moment, she suddenly woke up. Yes, only the first 6 sentences of the psalm that Master left me have come true. The last 2 sentences haven't come true. Chang'e has no regrets about stealing the elixir. Stealing the elixir, the elixir. If this psalm is true, doesn't it mean that Li Yundong is not completely dead and there are elixirs that can save him? Thinking of this, Zi Yuan immediately became energetic, as if she had come back to her senses. She said firmly in her heart, "It must be like this. The first 6 sentences of this psalm have come true. It's impossible that the last 2 sentences won't come true. Li Yundong must not be dead yet. He can definitely be saved." Zi Yuan kept repeating these words in her heart as if she was hypnotizing herself. She quickly rushed to Li Yundong's side, flipped her wrist, and took out a purple bottle she carried with her. She poured out several 9-flower jade dew pills from it and stuffed them into Li Yundong's mouth as if they were free. She moved in a hurry and her fingers trembled. The 9-flower jade dew pills, which were worth thousands of gold coins, slipped from the corner of Li Yundong's closed mouth and fell to the ground. She didn't even look at them. She just gently pinched Li Yundong's cheek with one hand and sent the pills into his mouth. At this time, although Li Yundong's soul and yang spirit were completely broken and he was like a vegetable, the pill melted in his mouth. After a while, it turned into a clear stream and merged into his body. Zi Yuan stretched out her hand and nervously felt the pulse of Li Yundong's wrist. But after a while, she saw that after the medicinal power of the 9-flower jade dew pills entered Li Yundong's body, it was like a clay ox sinking into the sea. There was no movement at all. Her heart tightened, and she couldn't help but think quickly. It seems that ordinary pills are no longer enough. There must be peerless elixirs. But, where can I find such a peerless elixir that can bring people back to life? Su Chan and Zhou Qin, who were next to her, saw Zi Yuan's movements. They both knew that Zi Yuan had always been calm and intelligent. She wouldn't do something meaningless for no reason. Therefore, seeing her movements at this time, they couldn't help but feel a sense of hope in their hearts. Su Chan blinked her tearful eyes and said timidly and eagerly, "Sister Zi Yuan, do you have a way to save Yundong?" Zhou Qin didn't say anything. She just clenched her fists and stared at Zi Yuan nervously. Zi Yuan opened her mouth and glanced at the two of them. Originally she wanted to say, yes, but when she saw the eagerness and hope in their eyes, she felt countless timidity and fear in her heart. She was afraid that if she failed, if the poem was wrong, if she didn't save Li Yundong, if she couldn't find the elixir, then she would give them hope and destroy it. They would definitely not be able to bear such a heavy blow. Zi Yuan said bitterly in a low voice, "No. I just. She said a few words in a row, but in the end, she didn't finish her sentence. However, Su Chan smiled sweetly and said to Zi Yuan, "Sister Zi Yuan, it's okay. With me accompanying Yundong, you can do whatever you want. Even if it doesn't work, it doesn't matter." As she said this, she turned her head and looked at Li Yundong in a daze. She choked up in a low voice and said, "I have become a devil that is condemned by all. He has never given up on me, nor has he abandoned me. Now that he has become like this, I will not leave him. As long as he doesn't wake up, I will be here with him. If he doesn't wake up for a year, I will be here with him for a year. If he doesn't wake up for a lifetime, I will be here with him forever." Su Chan said in a daze, "He must also want me to be with him." Zi Yuan looked at Su Chan and felt sad. She tried hard not to cry and nodded to Su Chan. Then she turned to Zhou Qin and said, "Zhou Qin, take care of them. I'll leave for a while." Zhou Qin and Zi Yuan had been together for a long time. She knew that Zi Yuan had a calm temperament. If she wasn't 100% sure, there were some things that she would never say. At this time, Zi Yuan's actions must mean that she was sure of something, but she wasn't sure, so she didn't dare to tell them. Zhou Qin thought about it for a while and didn't ask what Zi Yuan was going to do. She just nodded and couldn't help but feel a little hopeful in her heart. As soon as people had hope, their sadness immediately decreased a lot. Zhou Qin wiped away her tears and said, "Go. I'm here." Zi Yuan forced a smile and finally turned her head to leave. Chapter 939. An unprecedented battle had come to an end, and Mount Tianlong soon became deserted. The cultivators who had left had cleaned up the blood and corpses on the ground. Only by pulling up the ground full of fallen leaves and withered grass could one see the dark bloodstains deep under the ground. Ding Nan, who had once helped Li Yundong, stood beside him in a daze, not knowing where to go. She stared at Li Yundong, and the scenes in the school appeared in front of her eyes. For a moment, she was filled with emotion and tears welled up in her eyes. Ding Nan was crying not only because of the relationship between Li Yundong and Su Chan, but also because of her bad fate. Why wasn't she the person for whom Li Yundong would rather die? Why wasn't she the one who could stand by Li Yundong's side and take care of his affairs? Just as she was crying silently, Zhao Jing, Song Guohua, and the others from the Yinyang sect of Mount Wuhua arrived. They were out of breath after running and came to Ding Nan's side, looking around blankly and doubtfully. Song Guohua asked curiously, "Where are they? Leader, where are the people of the other sects? Are they all gone?" "No way." Zhao Jing looked at Li Yundong with her eyes wide open. She soon found Lin Miao beside him and couldn't help but be overjoyed. She couldn't help rushing over and shouting in English, Chris, I see you again." She had just run a few steps when she saw Lin Miao turn around. Her face was still covered with tears, and her eyes were full of tears. She raised her hand and blocked Zhao Jing in front of her. Her voice was choked, but it revealed a sense of firmness and determination. She said in Chinese, "There is no Chris here, only Lin Miao, only Li Yundong's disciple, Lin Miao." The ecstasy on Zhao Jing's face suddenly froze. She suddenly felt that Lin Miao in front of her was extremely strange, as if she had never known her before. Zhao Jing tentatively asked in awkward Chinese, "Cook. Lin Miao, what's wrong with you?" At this time, Lin Miao couldn't help but shed tears. "Don't you see that my master is dead? Alba, just go. If you want to go back to your country, go back. Don't disturb me. Let me have some peace." Zhao Jing was shocked. She looked at Li Yundong, only to see that the boy who used to talk and laugh was now motionless like a clay puppet. The girls beside him were all in tears. She didn't have a deep friendship with Li Yundong, so she naturally didn't have any feelings for him. Zhao Jing smiled awkwardly. She looked at Ding Nan next to her, then carefully said to Lin Miao, "Since you no longer have a master then, why don't you take my master as your master? That way we can be together." Before she could finish, Lin Miao was furious and shouted, "A teacher for a day is a father for a lifetime. Haven't you heard of this saying? Get lost, get lost." Zhao Jing was forced by Lin Miao's aura and involuntarily took 2 steps back. She said timidly, "I was just saying. Why are you so angry?" She was about to say something when she saw Ding Nan wiping away her tears and shouting, "Zhao Jing!" Zhao Jing was startled. She quickly walked over to Ding Nan and said cautiously, "Master." Ding Nan's voice was cold as she said, "Come back with me." Zhao Jing turned her head to look at Lin Miao and then at Li Yundong. She said, "But master." Ding Nan's voice suddenly became harsh and fierce. "If I ask you to go back, then go back. Why are you talking so much nonsense?" Zhao Jing immediately shivered and didn't dare to say anything more. She followed Ding Nan step by step. Ding Nan turned to leave, but before she left, she said to Zhou Qin, if you need any help, tell me." Speaking of this, she seemed to be afraid that Zhou Qin would misunderstand, so she added, "I'm doing this for Li Yundong, not you." At this time, Zhou Qin was not in the mood to care about the past disputes with Ding Nan. She smiled sadly and said, "If you can save him, I will do anything you want me to do." Ding Nan's expression darkened, and she said in a low voice, "Me too." At this moment, the two of them couldn't help raising their heads and looking at each other. In an instant, they could feel the sorrow in each other's hearts. In this world, only enemies understood each other the best. Ding Nan and Zhou Qin were like this. They used to be friends, but then they became enemies. Only the two of them could best understand each other's deep feelings of loss, but they couldn't get anything out of it. Ding Nan looked at Zhou Qin with a complicated look in her eyes and said, "When this matter is over, I will settle the score with you. Before that, I will let you go." The corner of Zhou Qin's mouth twitched. She said, "Me too." Ding Nan turned her head and glanced in the direction of the immortal pen in the stone room. She wanted to take the powerful magical weapon back, but she felt that taking it back at this time would be adding insult to injury. Although she never minded hitting others when they were down, there were always exceptions to everything. Li Yundong was the only person she would never do it to. After taking a look, Ding Nan struggled in her heart. Finally, she turned around and left. Like Xueqi and the others, although she knew that Li Yundong's soul had disappeared, she still hoped that Li Yundong could come back to life one day. Ding Nan and the others were the last to leave. Mount Tianlong fell into complete silence. Su Chan seemed to be unable to hear or see anything around her. At this time, there was only Li Yundong in her eyes. She stood beside Li Yundong in a daze and kept whispering in his ear, telling him everything that had happened between them. Xueqi stood to one side and looked at them silently. She didn't go forward, nor did she leave. She was like a guardian, lonely and lonely. At this time, Zi Yuan flew quickly to Mount Longhu. As soon as she got close to Mount Longhu, she landed and quickly rushed to the mountain where the Linggong sect was located. Her figure was like lightning, and it didn't take long for her to rush into the Taoist field of the Linggong sect. The Taoist field was now useless. There were still horizontal strips on the door, and the ground was overgrown with weeds. The beams and windows were densely covered with cobwebs. Zi Yuan ran all the way, and suddenly, she brought up a cloud of dust. She was shocked, but the dust behind her was rolling in the air, unable to fall for a long time. Zi Yuan passed through a cave, passed through a lotus pond, and rushed into the stone cave. She moved her 5 fingers on a smooth wall, and a pale yellow ripple appeared where her fingers passed. When these ripples were strung together, they formed a strange and exquisite rune. After Zi Yuan finished drawing the rune, she pressed her palm on it. Suddenly, the wall made a cracking sound, and a shelf stretched out from the wall. On the shelf were several thread-bound books, but these books were wrapped in fluorescent threads. Zi Yuan knew that this was a small magic formation set up to prevent someone from stealing the books. If someone forcibly took the books, the tiny threads on them would easily tear the books into pieces. Zi Yuan carefully pressed her palm on the bookshelf and poured her spiritual power and zhenqi into it. After a while, the bookshelf emitted a burst of light, and the lustrous threads on it retracted into the bookshelf one by one. Zi Yuan breathed a sigh of relief, picked up the book and began to read. She read 10 lines at a time, quickly looking for the chapter on elixirs in the book. When she turned to the chapter on elixirs, she heard a rustling sound behind her. Zi Yuan was suddenly shocked, and the 9th heaven Zi Yuan silk that she carried with her instantly stabbed behind her like a furious thunder. As soon as the 9th heaven Zi Yuan silk moved, she heard a familiar voice scream from the lotus pond outside the stone cave. "Xueqi, it's me." Zi Yuan was shocked again. She immediately moved her heart and mind, and the 9th heaven Zi Yuan silk stopped in front of Ruan Hongling in an instant. Zi Yuan walked out of the stone cave quickly, only to see Ruan Hongling squatting beside the lotus pond. One hand was wet, and the other was gently holding a lotus seed. Zi Yuan asked in surprise, "Why are you here? What are you doing here?" Ruan Hongling forced a smile and said, "Xueqi, I'm remaking Chao Kefi's soul." Zi Yuan took a closer look and saw that the lotus seed in Ruan Hongling's hand was crystal clear, emitting a soft white light. She could vaguely see a person's figure in it. She sighed softly and said, "It's really hard for you to think of this now. My heart is in a mess, and I didn't think of this at all. I'm really ashamed." Ruan Hongling carefully placed the lotus seed in her hand on a lotus leaf and squatted by the pond, staring at it intently. It wasn't until the lotus seed slowly grew a stem that she turned around and stood up. She asked curiously, "Xueqi, why are you here?" Hearing this, Zi Yuan was stunned. She didn't know how to answer, so she subconsciously hid the book in her hand behind her back. Ruan Hongling was also a very smart person. She looked over and saw that Zi Yuan was holding the Taoist treasure, Zhengyi Taoist Canon, in her hand. She was suddenly stunned. Taoist Canon was an encyclopedia that gathered almost all the history, illusions, magic, elixirs, the origin of the sect, and so on. Although this kind of book was also sold to the outside world, there was a huge difference between the part sold to the outside world and the part collected by the cultivation sects themselves. This was especially true when it came to pills, spells, and so on. Cultivation sects naturally had their reservations. Some of the books sold to the outside world recorded the method of making pills, but they often lacked a key ingredient. The Taoist canon that was kept in the sect's own storage not only recorded the method of making pills, but also the pill's origin, medicinal properties, usage, and the location where the sect stored the pills. The Taoist scriptures were as vast as the sea. Flipping through a piece of information was like looking for a needle in a haystack. The thick book in Zi Yuan's hand was just a general outline. She could only find the content she was looking for by flipping through the corresponding content and following the map. When Yuan Hongling saw that Zi Yuan had rushed back to the sect and was reading Zhengyi Taoist canon at this time, a thought flashed through her mind. She asked in surprise, "Xueqi, do you want to refine elixirs to save Li Yundong?" Seeing that Yuan Hongling had understood, Zi Yuan stopped hiding. She shook her head helplessly and said, "How can I refine a life-saving elixir in such a hurry? I just want to find out what kind of elixirs in the world can bring people back to life." Yuan Hongling sighed and said, "Where can I find them?" "Xueqi Zi Yuan, have you found them?" Zi Yuan shook her head and said, "I haven't found them, but..." Yuan Hongling's heart skipped a beat and she hurriedly asked, "But what?" Zi Yuan hesitated for a moment, bit her lip gently, and said, "I think that no matter what the elixir is, I always feel that it has been made." Yuan Hongling exclaimed and said quickly, "Xueqi, are you thinking about that psalm? Do you want to steal the elixir?" Zi Yuan sighed and said, "Do I have a better choice?" Yuan Hongling said, "But do you know where the elixir is?" Zi Yuan said, "I know, but I'm not sure." Yuan Hongling's eyes suddenly widened. "Where is it?" Zi Yuan couldn't help but look up at the main peak of Mount Longhu. She said in a seemingly irrelevant manner, "I've been wondering, why did the Zhengyi school suddenly want to rebuild the Sanju Formation?" Yuan Hongling blurted out, "You mean, they built the Sanju Formation to protect the elixir? What kind of elixir could make them value it so much?" Zi Yuan said softly, "No matter what it is, I have to go and have a look. But before that, I have to find out where the elixir is usually stored in the Zhengyi school." Yuan Hongling was shocked. "Xueqi, you know about the Sanju Formation, but you still want to go? You will die." Zi Yuan turned her face, her eyes full of sadness. "Master is gone, and if Li Yundong is also gone, then what's the point of living?" As she said this, she turned around faintly and continued to walk into the stone cave to look up the Taoist canon. Yuan Hongling stared blankly at Zi Yuan's figure. It was the first time that she had seen her Xueqi admit her inner feelings in front of her. For a moment, her heart was in turmoil, and she was stunned. Chapter 940. Late at night, the sky above Mount Longhu was covered with dark clouds, and the sky was drizzling like a crisp rain. From time to time, a series of lightning flashed through the clouds, illuminating the world. Mount Longhu was located in the darkness of this rainy night, like a silent giant. The low thunder in the sky rumbled, majestic and solemn. Zi Yuan stood at the entrance of the cave residence of the Linggong sect. She raised her head and looked at the sky, motionless, as if she was waiting for something silently. She didn't know how long she had waited like this. Suddenly, she saw a golden light flash on the main peak of Mount Longhu and go straight into the thunderclouds. Suddenly, there was a loud thunder and lightning. Seeing this, Zi Yuan's eyes suddenly narrowed, and her eyes were firm and decisive. She had been waiting for the arrival of the thunderstorm for the past few days. She was waiting for Zhang Tianshi, who was the greatest threat to her, to plunge into the thunderclouds to transcend the thunder tribulation. Now, she had finally waited for this opportunity. She immediately moved and rushed toward the main peak of the Zhengyi school. However, not long after Zi Yuan rushed out, a person suddenly appeared beside her. Zi Yuan turned her head and saw that the person beside her had a ponytail and a bright forehead. Although it was night, it was still difficult to hide her beauty. It was her shimmy, Yuan Hongling. Zi Yuan suddenly stopped and said in surprise and anger, "Hongling, didn't I tell you not to follow me?" Zi Yuan knew that this trip was extremely dangerous. Zhengyi school had spent a lot of manpower and material resources to rebuild the Sanju Formation, so it must be extremely powerful. Even if Li Yundong was still alive and the mystical silver fox was still alive, if they accidentally entered the Sanju Formation, they would probably end up being annihilated. Although Zi Yuan was already a master of the Thunder Tribulation, there was still a big gap between her and Li Yundong and the mystical silver fox. She knew that it was very likely that she would not be able to come back from this trip, so she deliberately asked Yuan Hongling to carefully take care of Xueqi's soul by the lotus pond in the stone cave these days, while she herself was at the entrance of the cave, paying close attention to the situation of the main peak of Mount Longhu. But what Zi Yuan didn't expect was that although Yuan Hongling had promised her well, as soon as Zi Yuan left the cave residence, she followed her. Yuan Hongling usually followed Zi Yuan's lead. Especially when Zi Yuan was angry, she didn't dare to contradict her. If she said to go west, she would never go east. But at this time, there was a firm and decisive look in Yuan Hongling's eyes. She said, Xueqi, now there are only the two of us left in the Linggong sect. Do you think I will let you take the risk alone? Have you ever thought about what I would do if something happened to you? Zi Yuan's heart trembled when she heard this, but her face was still full of anger. She scolded, no, your cultivation is not high enough. You can't go with me. However, Yuan Hongling did not back down and asked, Senior sister, your cultivation is indeed much higher than mine, but no matter how high your cultivation is, if you enter the Sanju formation and cause it to be activated, do you think you can escape? Is there any difference between a lightning tribulation expert and a person like me in the triple terminal formation? Zi Yuan was silent for a while. She knew that what Yuan Hongling said was true, and she couldn't refute it. But she still didn't want Yuan Hongling to take the risk with her, so she said earnestly, Hongling, I still have a chance to escape alone. If there are two of us. I really. At this point, Zi Yuan's voice was already trembling a little, and she couldn't go on. Yuan Hongling's eyes were also red, and tears flowed down her cheeks. In the rain, the tears and raindrops mixed together, and it was hard to distinguish between tears and rain. She sobbed and said, Xueqi, don't worry, I will never hold you back. I'm just begging you to take me with you. You used to bring me with you for everything, but ever since you left the mountain, you don't tell me anything, and you don't take me with you anymore. Am I still your junior sister? Zi Yuan sighed and gently wiped the water and tears from Yuan Hongling's face. She said softly, then you have to promise me that if anything happens, you have to leave immediately and don't care about me. Do you understand? Yuan Hongling wiped her tears hard and nodded. I understand. Zi Yuan stared at her. Seeing her firm expression, she didn't know if she had listened to her. Zi Yuan didn't want to waste any more time. After a sigh, she continued to rush toward the main peak of Mount Longhu, with Yuan Hongling quickly following behind her. After the earth-shattering battle, almost everything had been settled, so Mount Longhu had also relaxed a lot. In addition, it was late at night, and it was also the precious moment. Almost all the cultivators were cultivating in meditation. Zhang Tianshi, the strongest person in the Xueqi school, had also gone into the thunderclouds to transcend the lightning tribulation. Therefore, the defense of Mount Longhu had almost dropped to an unprecedented level. Zi Yuan herself was a master of the lightning tribulation and an inner disciple. She was extremely good at hiding her aura and traces. Therefore, although she was carrying Yuan Hongling, whose cultivation was not high, she could still easily sneak into the main peak from the side peak. The two of them arrived at the main peak of the Xueqi school, passed through the mountain gate, walked along the stone steps, and arrived in front of the majestic Taoist master's mansion. At this time, there were only two middle-aged Taoist priests on duty in front of the gate. Under the cover of the goddess Nian's seal, Zi Yuan and Yuan Hongling carefully passed under their noses. After passing through the main hall of the Taoist master's mansion, they walked nervously and vigilantly to the back hall. After walking for a while, they saw that the courtyard around them was getting darker and darker, and it was frighteningly quiet. Yuan Hongling looked around and saw that the night was as thick as ink. No matter how hard she looked, she couldn't see where they were going to hide the elixir. Yuan Hongling couldn't help but send a voice transmission to Zi Yuan, saying, Xueqi, do you know where the elixir is hidden? Zi Yuan also looked around and then said, if I'm not wrong, we should be able to guess where the elixir is hidden according to the density of the spiritual qi around us. Yuan Hongling said, the place with the densest spiritual qi should be the Sanju formation, right? Zi Yuan nodded and said, yes, the Sanju formation is very powerful. If there are no powerful magical weapons and cultivators with strong spiritual qi guarding it, there will definitely be amazing murderous intent and spiritual power soaring into the sky, triggering all kinds of strange phenomena. Therefore, we only need to follow the direction with the densest spiritual qi. Yuan Hongling nodded and continued to follow Zi Yuan carefully, not saying anything more. After observing for a while, Zi Yuan closed her eyes slightly and the yang spirit in her body went out. In an instant, it turned into countless extremely tiny spots of light and spread in all directions. Not long after, These spots of light quickly gathered from all directions and formed Zi Yuan's yang spirit again. Soon, Zi Yuan's yang spirit entered her body. She opened her eyes and said, "I see. Follow me." Zi Yuan leaped up and quickly went into the depths of the back hall. After passing through a series of palaces and wing rooms, they finally arrived at the cliff at the back of the main peak of Mount Longhu. Zi Yuan stood at the edge of the cliff and looked down. It was dark at the bottom of the mountain, like the mouth of a giant beast. It was extremely terrifying. Ruan Hongling also stretched out her head to take a look and couldn't help but say in surprise, "Xueqi, are you sure it's here? There's no way out." Zi Yuan thought for a moment and said, "Come down with me." After that, she leaped up and flew down the cliff. Ruan Hongling also flew over. The two of them slowly descended along the steep cliff, carefully looking around with the help of the lightning from time to time. Soon, Zi Yuan found that there was a talisman carved on the cliff in front of her. Her heart skipped a beat and she immediately looked to the side. Sure enough, there were other talismans carved regularly not far away. Zi Yuan immediately turned her wrist, and a beating cyan flame appeared in her palm, illuminating the surroundings. She used the light of the flame to take a closer look and saw that the talismans were gathering in one place from all directions. They were getting closer and closer, and the closer they were to the center, the denser they were. She immediately flew toward the center of the talismans. As soon as she flew over, she saw a huge stone beast standing on the cliff. It was an azure dragon entrenched in a ball. Zi Yuan was stunned. Soon, she looked at the other side of the diagonal. Her body moved and she flew to a place more than 100 meters away. Sure enough, she found the same scene. In the surrounding talisman matrix, there was a stone beast standing in it. It was the vermilion bird. At this time, Ruan Hongling also reacted. She whispered, "Sister Zi Yuan, are these 4 mythological beasts guarding the spiritual medicine we are looking for?" Zi Yuan shook her head. "It's not that simple. These 4 mythological beasts and so many talisman matrices should be specially designed to suppress the amazing murderous aura and spiritual energy of the Sanju formation." After she finished speaking, she flew toward the center of the 4 mythological beasts. After flying for a distance, she found 2 swords stuck in a stone wall. The hilts of these 2 swords went straight into the rock wall. There were weeds and shrubs growing on the cliff around them. If she didn't look closely, she wouldn't have been able to find them at all. Zi Yuan pushed aside the weeds and shrubs and saw that there were extremely small and dense talismans around the hilts of the swords. There was a burst of dark red light in the lines of the talismans, which was faintly discernible. Zi Yuan saw that the engravings around the talisman matrices were old, but there was no rust on the hilts of the 2 long swords, as if they were new. She couldn't help but be stunned and turned to look at Ruan Hongling. Ruan Hongling also looked at the 2 swords in surprise. Although her cultivation was not high, she was also an inner disciple and had a lot of knowledge. She whispered, "Xueqi, these 2 swords are a little strange. Could it be the mechanism to open the Sanju formation?" Zi Yuan raised her arm and wiped the cliff with her slender hand. In an instant, countless tiny balls of fire ignited one after another, like a faint wall of fire. This wall of fire illuminated the cliff, making it extremely clear. Zi Yuan's figure floated away in an instant. After looking at it from a distance, she wiped her hand again, and the wall of fire disappeared in an instant. Not even a single weed was ignited. Zi Yuan's figure flashed back to Ruan Hongling's side and said, "You're right, but also wrong. If I'm not wrong, these 2 swords should be the key magic weapons to block the murderous aura and spiritual energy of the Sanju formation. As long as we pull out these 2 swords, the Sanju formation should be opened and we should be able to enter." Ruan Hongling's heart trembled. At the last moment, she suddenly felt timid. Looking at the 2 sword hilts, her eyes flashed. Zi Yuan seemed to have sensed her heart and said softly to her, "Hongling, you've already accompanied me here. Why don't you go back first?" However, Ruan Hongling gritted her teeth and reached out to hold one of the hilts. She said, "Xueqi, don't you see that there are 2 swords here? Obviously, 2 people need to draw the swords at the same time. And if I'm not wrong, the strength and speed of the 2 people should be the same. Otherwise, it will cause the formation to backfire, right?" Zi Yuan sighed and said in a slow and solemn tone, "Hongling, you're right, but you have to think it through. If we open the formation, there will be no turning back." Ruan Hongling said firmly, "Xueqi, You can't open this formation alone. Don't say any more. We've already come this far. How can we go back? Zi Yuan didn't say anything more. She nodded, took a deep breath, and slowly reached out to the hilt of the other sword. Chapter 941. Zi Yuan and Ruan Hongling stretched out their hands at the same time and held the hilt of the sword on the cliff. In an instant, light patterns appeared on the hilt of the sword, and the cliff began to tremble violently, and stones rustled down. Xueqi, calm, Zi Yuan and Ruan Hongling had grown up together. They were almost inseparable when they ate and cultivated. In terms of telepathy, they might not be as good as the twins Deng Yu and Deng Jiao, but compared to others, they were much stronger. They looked at each other and nodded slightly. At the same time, they exerted their strength and slowly pulled out the long swords in their hands. For a moment, the long swords made a violent and ear-piercing sound of friction with the cliff wall, which was extremely ear-piercing in the middle of the night. Zi Yuan and Ruan Hongling were extremely nervous. Their palms, which were holding the hilts of the swords, were full of sweat. They were afraid of alarming the many cultivators of the Xueqi school. They couldn't help but look at each other again. At the same time, they gritted their teeth and pulled out the long swords with all their might. With a clang, the two long swords were immediately pulled out by the two of them. The long sword shone brilliantly, and the sword light soared into the sky. After the swords were pulled out, a burst of colorful divine light immediately appeared in the two original sword grooves. The colors were extremely bright and colorful. Then the stone wall rumbled and slowly opened, revealing a huge stone cave inside. The stone cave was full of all kinds of colorful light, which was dazzling and dazzling. The long swords in Zi Yuan and Ruan Hongling's hands also trembled violently at this time, making a buzzing sound. After a while, they shattered into countless dust and disappeared in their hands. Zi Yuan and Ruan Hongling looked at their hands in surprise. After looking at each other nervously, Zi Yuan bit her lip and said, "Hongling, wait outside. I'll go in and have a look." She moved and flew into the stone cave. However, as soon as she flew in, she saw Ruan Hongling following her. Zi Yuan couldn't help but want to scold her, but when she saw the incomparably firm look between Ruan Hongling's eyebrows, her heart trembled and she couldn't help but sigh. Without saying anything more, she turned around and rushed inside. When the two of them entered the cave, they saw that both sides of the cave were filled with grooves that had been chiseled out. Within the grooves, there were densely packed spirit tablets and talismans. On the ground, there were many long swords that were stabbed into the ground one after another. Some of the swords didn't even have a hilt, some of the swords were half exposed, some of the swords were rusted, and some of the swords had a bone-piercing cold light. Zi Yuan and Ruan Hongling took a closer look and were shocked. They recognized that many of the long swords here had been used by the previous leaders of the Xueqi school. Although they knew that they were in an extremely dangerous magic formation, they still couldn't help but widen their eyes and stand still. They looked at these swords in astonishment. Ruan Hongling pointed to the sword closest to her and said, "Isn't this Qing Yun, the personal sword of Zhang Ku, the 35th generation ancestor of our Xueqi school, Celestial Master Zhang?" Zi Yuan couldn't help but stare at a blue long sword not far away and say, This seems to be the personal sword of our Linggong sect's ancestor, Xueqi, Zhenren Xue." The two of them seemed to have entered the sword hall of the world's famous swords. They looked at the swords one by one and saw that the personal swords left behind by the ancestors of the Xueqi school and the Linggong sect were placed inside. Each long sword had an extremely glorious and legendary history. At this time, each sword stood quietly in this stone cave, like a huge sword grave. Xueqi learning. Calm. Along the way, the two of them were shaken and tongue-tied. Especially when they saw a 3-feet-long Qing Feng sword in the lead and the 3 words engraved on the hilt. They were so shocked that they couldn't control themselves. The Dragon Tiger Cloud Spring Sword? This is the sword of ancestor Zhang Daoling. Ruan Hongling couldn't help but exclaim. She couldn't believe her eyes. This sword has been passed down to this day? Why didn't I know? Zi Yuan said solemnly. It seems that before the ancestors ascended, they would place their personal magic treasures and swords here. In the long run they formed an extremely powerful force. The Xueqi school used this force to rebuild the Sanju formation. Ruan Hongling withdrew her shocked gaze and looked forward again. She was shocked again. She stretched out her hand and said in a trembling voice, "Xueqi, look." Zi Yuan saw that at the end of the sword tunnel was a large stone room. From a distance, She could see that there was an extremely strong seven-colored light flowing inside. The light that had overflowed from the mouth of the stone cave had come from here. This light was extremely dense, as if seven-colored paint had been splashed into a ball and mixed together. It couldn't be disintegrated, but it didn't fuse with each other. It just slowly twisted and flowed, emitting an extremely dazzling light. Within this ball of light was a medicinal pot that was suspended in the air. This medicinal pot was shaped like a gourd, but it was completely dark green and slightly transparent. Even from afar, one could vaguely see that there was a fireball-like ball hidden within. Zi Yuan only took a look at the medicine pot, and her pupils immediately widened. She couldn't help but tremble all over. Is this Gu Hong's powerful magic weapon? The heaven and earth pot? Ruan Hongling couldn't help but be ecstatic. She pulled Zi Yuan's arm excitedly and said loudly, "Xueqi, it's the heaven and earth pot. This is the heaven and earth pot." In the 5th volume of the Legend of the Immortals, Gu Hong had recorded his two powerful magic weapons. One was the hemp jade pole, and the other was the heaven and earth pot. This powerful magic weapon not only had the ability to create 1,000 worlds out of thin air like the purple gold luo jade plate, but it was also the personal magic weapon used by Gu Hong, the founder of the Danding sect, for alchemy. In the Chinese cultivation world, when it came to alchemy magic weapons, the heaven and earth pot and the medicine king tripod would be mentioned. The former was the personal magic weapon of the founder of the Danding sect, and the latter was the personal magic weapon of Sun Simiao, the king of medicine. The effects of the two were extremely amazing, and it was hard to tell which was better. Zi Yuan saw that the heaven and earth pot had been carefully preserved in the Sanju formation, and there were clearly visible elixirs in it. It was obvious that the elixirs were secretly being refined by the Zhengyi school. Combined with the psalms left by Wang Yuanshan, Zi Yuan immediately concluded that this must be the elixir that could bring people back to life. Thinking of this, Zi Yuan did not hesitate. With a leap, she arrived in front of the heaven and earth kettle. With a wave of her slender hand and a wave of her sleeve, the colorful halo was immediately dispelled by Zi Yuan, revealing the dark green heaven and earth kettle. Zi Yuan reached out to grab the heaven and earth pot. Ruan Hongling, who was beside her, suddenly said in shock, "Shajiv." Before she could finish speaking, she saw that Zi Yuan had already grabbed the heaven and earth pot with one hand. As soon as her hand touched the green medicine pot, suddenly there was a loud clanging sound around her. In the passage where she had come in before, countless personal swords left by the ancestors of the Zhengyi school and the Linggong sect floated up and pointed at Zi Yuan from afar. They were full of murderous intent, and the sword light was shining in all directions. Zi Yuan was shocked. Not only did she not release the medicine pot, but she also gritted her teeth and quickly poured out the elixir in the pot. She saw a thumb-sized pill roll out. The pill was red and glowed faintly. Even Zi Yuan could not recognize what kind of pill it was. But now she was just trying to make a Hail Mary. She couldn't care less. With a flip of her wrist, she held the pill in her palm, and then shouted at Ruan Hongling, "Hongling, go!" But as soon as she finished speaking, she saw countless magic swords around her rushing toward Zi Yuan. These were the personal swords used by the leaders of the Zhengyi school and the Linggong sect. Each of them could be called a divine weapon. Their power was not much inferior to that of the Bahuang sword. With so many swords attacking together, the momentum was really too terrifying. Before she got close, all the hair on Zi Yuan's body stood on end. Her heart trembled, and with a thought, the 9th heaven Zi Yuan silk appeared in front of her in an instant, wrapping her tightly. Although the 9th heaven Zi Yuan silk was an extremely powerful divine weapon, compared with so many magic swords, it was obviously weak. It was difficult for 2 fists to fight against 4 hands. In addition, the cave was full of magic spells, talismans, and many magic swords formed the Sanju formation. Therefore, as soon as the two came into contact, the 9th heaven Zi Yuan silk immediately collapsed and was instantly torn into countless pieces. Zi Yuan's face changed drastically, and she looked extremely frightened. She saw that the magic swords had surrounded her so tightly that not even a drop of water could escape. Without thinking, she raised her hand and threw the pill at Ruan Hongling. She shouted, "Hongling, take the spiritual medicine and leave quickly." Ruan Hongling reacted quickly and caught it in her hand. She looked at Zi Yuan, whose body was almost covered by the dense magic swords, in horror and shouted, "Xueqi, what are you going to do?" Seeing that she was hesitating and unwilling to leave, Zi Yuan couldn't help but shout, "Why don't you go? You will die if you stay. Go, go." After that, she clapped her hand and a gust of wind came out, slapping Yuan Hongling far away. Yuan Hongling's eyes were filled with tears. She gritted her teeth, turned her head, and quickly turned into a blue light and flew out of the cave. When Zi Yuan saw her leave, her tense heart relaxed in an instant. A smile slowly appeared on her face, and she was relieved and relieved. She raised her head, as if she wanted to see the distant sky through the thick top of the cave, and also wanted to see the person she cared about in the deep and boundless sky. At this moment, the magic swords around Zi Yuan slowly shrank back, layer by layer, circle by circle, like waves, layers upon layers, or like a bow that was being drawn. In the next second, thousands of arrows would be shot at the same time, instantly tearing this ethereal fairy into pieces. However, Zi Yuan seemed to be unable to see these magic swords and magic weapons around her. Suddenly, scenes flashed before her eyes. It was clearly the little things that she and Li Yundong had met. When the two of them were driving together in Tibet, they didn't know whether to laugh or cry. They were busy in the kitchen, and they were trapped in the immortal tying rope together. She vaguely remembered a Taoist stroking a girl's head and saying with a smile, "Zi Yuan, that person is your destiny. He is your love. Don't hide. You can't hide. Don't run away. You can't escape." This series of scenes flashed quickly in front of Zi Yuan's eyes. Her heart trembled, and her eyes became confused in an instant. But gradually, a figure gradually appeared in these scenes. It was the scene of Li Yundong arduously trekking for Suchan, the 1,000-mile Zhuji phase, and the scene of Li Yundong challenging the 6 great sects alone for Suchan. Didn't they get to know each other because of that fox? Slowly, these scenes appeared in front of Zi Yuan's eyes. The days when Li Yundong and Suchan were together day and night. The intimate figures of the lovers swayed and swayed in front of her eyes, like the flickering candlelight in the depths of the dark and cold road, illuminating her soul and warming her heart. Gradually, a smile appeared on the corner of Zi Yuan's mouth, warm and calm. Her eyes were no longer confused, struggling, and confused. She waited for the moment of fate to come and said softly, "All the Tao ancestors, all the gods and Buddhas, all the ancestors, I hope you can forgive me for my sins and let Li Yundong and Suchan go. I, Zi Yuan, am willing to bear any calamity or pain in the world. Even if my body is broken into pieces, I will never complain." Zi Yuan formed a palm with one hand, lowered her head, and smiled slightly. She slowly closed her eyes, but at the moment she closed her eyes, countless magic swords in the 3Ju formation made a deafening roar like a dragon and rushed toward her like a storm. I'm sorry, everyone. I've been so busy today. In the afternoon, I went to the company to report the bill. I was informed that I would meet the boss of Xuanlei Company in the evening. While waiting, I took the time to finish the chapter in the company. I hope you can understand. Chapter 942. Rumble. Lightning flashed all over Mount Longhu, and thunder rumbled. Flashes of golden light could be seen faintly in the thunderclouds. In a side room in the back hall of the Taoist master mansion, Deng Yu and Deng Jiao were sitting cross-legged and meditating. Although the two of them were not great masters, their cultivation potential could be said to be rare in the world because they had reforged their bodies and souls with lotus seeds and lotus hearts in the lotus pond of the Linggong sect. In addition, the two of them were chosen to be the sword spirits of the 3 ultimate formation, and they themselves had the power to mobilize the 3 ultimate formation. Therefore, as long as their strength increased a little, the 3 ultimate formation would amplify their power in the formation. At this time, they were meditating with their eyes closed, absorbing the spiritual chi of heaven and earth leaked from the heavenly thunder in the awakening thunderstorm. Suddenly, their hearts skipped a beat, as if something heavy had stabbed them in the chest. They opened their eyes at the same time. Deng Yu's eyes widened, and she couldn't help but look in the direction of the Sanju formation. "Sister, it seems that there is something wrong with the Sanju formation." Deng Jiao didn't like to talk much, so she said briefly, "Let's go and have a look." The 2 charming twins immediately leaped out. As soon as they leaped out of the door, they saw a faint 7-colored divine light coming from the direction of the 3 extremes formation. The two of them looked at each other and were shocked. They immediately ran toward the 3 extremes formation. The farther they were from the Sanju formation, the weaker they were. However, the closer they were to the Sanju formation, the stronger they were. At first, they could only run quickly. Although their speed was extremely fast, it was only a little faster than ordinary people. Compared with a young spirit master like Zhang Lufeng, they were much worse. However, the closer they got to the Sanju formation, the faster they moved, and the more vigorous the qi flowing in their bodies became. It was like a pot of water, more and more tumbling and boiling. When they came to the cliff at the back of the mountain, their bodies were flowing with amazing cyan light. With a stomp of their feet, they immediately jumped more than 10 meters away, as if they were gliding. Deng Yu and Deng Jiao looked at the cliff and saw a figure turning into a blue light and flashing out of the cave. The two of them were shocked, and Deng Yu blurted out, "Someone has entered the array." After the two of them were rescued, they had been living in the Zhengyi school. Zhang Ling had taught them how to control and operate the Sanju formation. At this time, their minds and divine senses were closely connected with the Sanju formation. The moment they grabbed the hilt of the sword, they had already felt that something was wrong. When they arrived, they happened to see Wan Hongling escaping from the Sanju formation with the spiritual medicine. Although Deng Yu and Deng Jiao were the masters of the three extremes great formation, the two of them lacked experience in fights of magical powers. Suddenly encountering such a situation, they did not know what to do. Should they chase after him, or should they enter the array to investigate? Deng Yu was usually talkative and witty, but when it came to such a situation, she was really helpless. Deng Jiao, who was usually quiet, suddenly said, "Let's go into the array and have a look. The person who just escaped seems to know her." The two of them were twins, and their hearts were connected. As soon as Deng Jiao mentioned it, Deng Yu immediately exclaimed and said, "I remember. It's Wan Hongling, Zhenren Wan from the inauguration ceremony of the Linggong sect. Why is she here? Let's go and have a look, sister." The two of them jumped down the cliff hand in hand. Although they were wearing dark blue Taoist robes, the loose clothes almost completely covered their graceful bodies. When they fell, the strong wind surged, making their sleeves flutter wildly. Although it was late at night, the sky was rolling with thunder, and the earth was deep and gloomy, with the flashes of lightning, they still looked like immortals who had descended to the world. Deng Yu and Deng Jiao continued to fall from the sky. The moment they reached the entrance of the cave, the seven-colored divine light that gushed out from the cave suddenly condensed into two seven-colored swords. These two seven-colored swords fell right under Deng Yu and Deng Jiao's feet, stopping their falling figures. Deng Yu and Deng Jiao seemed to have long been used to such a situation. They stood on the light sword, which was only 2 fingers wide, but their bodies did not shake at all. They stood steadily and flew into the cave with the light sword. As soon as the two of them flew into the cave, they saw that the Sanju formation had been activated automatically, and countless divine swords rushed toward Ziyuan like stormy waves. Deng Yu and Deng Jiao took a closer look and were shocked. They knew Ziyuan, not only at the inauguration ceremony, but also at school. Especially when Ziyuan and Li Yundong had acted in the Legend of Sword and Fairy on the stage together. Ziyuan's immortal aura had left a deep impression on them. Although the two of them didn't know that it was Ziyuan and Ruan Hongling who had saved them and helped them rebuild their bodies, they knew that Ziyuan and Li Yundong were very close friends. The two of them were almost inseparable, day and night. For the sake of Ziyuan, Li Yundong had fought at the inauguration ceremony. This matter had spread throughout the cultivation world, and it could be said that everyone knew about it. Deng Yu and Deng Jiao had a very deep love and reverence for Li Yundong. Naturally, they also had a very deep affection for Ziyuan. When they saw that Ziyuan was about to die in the Sanju formation, they were shocked and shouted in unison, "Stop!" The two of them were the sword spirits of the Sanju formation, and they were connected with the power of the formation and the magic weapons. Therefore, as soon as their minds moved, the divine swords that were flying out immediately stopped in mid-air. The edges of the swords that were closest to Ziyuan had almost pierced her skin, causing a trace of red blood to ooze out of her delicate skin. When Ziyuan heard this voice, her heart skipped a beat and she opened her eyes slightly. At a glance, she saw Deng Yu and Deng Jiao standing on a colorful light sword. Their figures were outstanding. She couldn't help but be stunned and blurted out, "Yum." Deng Yu also looked at Ziyuan in bewilderment and asked, "Zhenren Ziyuan, why are you here?" As she spoke, she couldn't help but glance at the heaven and earth kettle next to her. She was stunned and vaguely felt that something was wrong. At this time, a few people suddenly flew in from the stone cave. The leader was dressed in a Taoist robe. Although his appearance was ordinary, there was a cinnabar between his eyebrows and a majestic appearance. It was Zhang Ling. Zhang Ling saw Ziyuan at a glance, and then she saw the empty heaven and earth kettle. She immediately trembled all over and shouted angrily, "Ziyuan, how dare you trespass into the forbidden area of Mount Longhu and steal the sun and moon flowing elixir? Are you crazy? Where is the elixir? Hand it over." The sun and moon flowing elixir? Ziyuan's face was as calm as a lake. She smiled slightly, lowered her eyes, and said in a low voice, "I don't have the elixir, but I have a life." Ziyuan was familiar with many cultivation classics of both Buddhism and Taoism. When she heard Zhang Ling's words, she immediately realized that the elixir she had asked Wan Hongling to take away was the magical elixir known as the reversal of the sun and moon, the flowing of the universe, the living eat the dead, and the dead eat the living. The earliest source of this elixir came from the book, The Deed of Understanding of the Book of Changes, written by Wei Boyong of the Eastern Han Dynasty. This book was the earliest systematic work on refining external elixirs in the Chinese cultivation world and even in the world. It was known as the Group of Elixir Scriptures and the King of Eternal Elixir Scriptures. This book detailed the refining method of external elixir. After several works, such as Textual Research on the Deed of Understanding of the Book of Changes, annotated by Xueqi, a Confucian master of the Song dynasty, Chen Weiwei, a famous Taoist priest of the Song dynasty, and Exertion of the Deed of Understanding of the Book of Changes, annotated by Yu Yan, a Taoist priest of the Yuan dynasty, the alchemy skills of the external alchemy sect had reached the pinnacle. Among them, the sun and moon flowing elixir was a magical elixir created by the founder of the Xueqi sect according to these classics. The effect of this elixir was to reverse the universe and reverse life and death. Its magic was indescribable. After Zhang Tianshi and the others of the Xueqi sect learned that the cultivation world was about to face a great calamity more than a decade ago, they had been preparing to deal with it. Not only had they prepared the absolute love extinguishing formation, but they had also prepared the Sanju formation and the sun and moon flowing elixir. This was in case Zhang Tianshi, the sect master of the Xueqi sect, was unfortunately taken advantage of by the devil path before he achieved the Tao. At that time, if there was still a disciple of the Xueqi sect, he could use this elixir to save Zhang Tianshi, so that the incense of the Xueqi sect would not be extinguished. It could be said that such an elixir was of great significance to the Xueqi sect. It was comparable to a powerful magical weapon of the sect, but it had been stolen by Ziyuan. But the most hateful thing was that Ziyuan, a fairy who was usually otherworldly and elegant, had suddenly stolen the elixir that the Xueqi sect had secretly cultivated for many years. Now, she had even said such a shameless thing. Zhang Ling was so angry that she jumped up and down. Zhang Ling was trembling all over. She pointed at Ziyuan and was so angry that she couldn't speak clearly. You good. Ziyuan, there was a way to heaven, but you didn't take it. There was no door to hell, but you still came. This time, you've caused too much trouble. Zhou Ping, who was following behind Zhang Ling, glanced at Ziyuan. She saw that Ziyuan was unusually calm, as if she was completely unaware of the countless swords surrounding her. She also didn't notice that the blade of the god of death was on her neck, ferocious and cold. She just stood there lightly, the hem of her dress gently swaying on the ground. She was like a rosy cloud, unruffled and calm, as if everything in this world had nothing to do with her. It was as if she had already attained the Tao. Her calmness revealed an unusually strong power. This power had nothing to do with spiritual power or zhenqi. It was just the power produced by the transcendent bearing of a person who had put life and death aside. This kind of power made Zhou Ping's heart tremble. It was as if she had met this beautiful, elegant, and otherworldly woman for the first time. Since Zhang Tianhe was no longer infatuated with Ziyuan and became closer to Zhou Ping, her jealousy of Ziyuan had weakened a lot. At this time when she saw her, she felt the same way. It was as if she had touched and understood Ziyuan's inner world. She understood the infatuation of, what is love in the world? It is only called life and death. Zhou Ping couldn't help but say to Zhang Ling, Master, why don't we leave this to sect leader? Zhang Ling said angrily, Bull*T, sect leader is undergoing thunder retribution now. Ziyuan has betrayed the sect. I want to remove her from Mount Longhu and revoke her right to inherit the position of sect leader of Linggong sect. Deng Yu and Deng Jiao secretly breathed a sigh of relief when they heard this. They were afraid that Zhang Ling would get angry and ask them to kill Ziyuan on the spot in the Sanju formation. If that was the case, they really didn't know what to do. But not long after they were happy, they heard Zhang Ling shout angrily, Deng Yu, Deng Jiao. Seal the Sanju formation and lock Ziyuan in it. She will never be released. Deng Yu and Deng Jiao were shocked. Deng Yu couldn't help but exclaim, "Master." Zhang Ling glared at the two of them. "Are you going to disobey your master's orders?" Although Deng Yu and Deng Jiao were outstanding in this formation, their cultivation quotients had all been taught by Zhang Ling. Therefore, they respected and feared Zhang Ling. Although they couldn't bear to do it, they didn't dare to say anything. Deng Yu and Deng Jiao looked at each other, then lowered their heads and said, "Yes, master." Zhang Ling snorted angrily. After glaring at Zi Yuan, she left angrily. As soon as they came out of the cave, Deng Yu and Deng Jiao also flew out. The two of them turned their heads and helplessly looked at Zi Yuan, whose figure was faintly discernible in the cave. They sighed in their hearts and silently recited the incantation. Suddenly, there was a rumbling sound from the cliff, and the surrounding rocks surged like a wave toward the entrance of the cave. In a short while, the entrance was tightly sealed, leaving no trace. The original entrance of the cave was covered with layers of rocks and dense bushes. No one could see that a beautiful fairy was sealed inside. Chapter 943. Ruan Hongling rushed to Mount Tianlong with the sun and moon flowing elixir. As she flew, she wiped away her tears, and the memories in the depths of her mind kept flashing in her mind. She clearly remembered that she and Xueqi Zi Yuan had chased Su Chan to the balcony of Li Yundong's house. The two of them had lost the clue and returned without success. But what they didn't know at that time was that this was the beginning of a touching love and the beginning of the entanglement of Zi Yuan's fate. Especially when she had been beaten by Li Yundong and fled in a sorry state. When she returned to Mount Longhu and asked Xueqi Zi Yuan to go down the mountain, the psalm left by Wang Yuanshan had come true. Ruan Hongling knew about this psalm. At first, she didn't think much of it, but as time went on and Zi Yuan and Li Yundong became more and more entangled, she had become deeply convinced of this psalm. Even she didn't know when she had begun to recognize and accept Li Yundong. In her opinion, Li Yundong and Zi Yuan should be a match made in heaven. When the two of them were together, they would be an immortal couple, the most perfect combination. However, the longer Ruan Hongling spent with Su Chan, the more she liked and sympathized with her. She was deeply moved by the sincere feelings between Li Yundong and Su Chan, but she also felt that it was not worth it for her Xueqi. Especially now, sacrificing herself to help the two of them. This was simply the stupidest behavior in the world. Ruan Hongling didn't dare to look back in the direction of Mount Longhu. She was afraid that if she looked back, she wouldn't be able to help going back to save her Xueqi. She knew that Zi Yuan was trapped in the Sanju Formation and would definitely be in danger. It was very likely that when she said goodbye to her in the cave, it would be the last time she would ever see her again. "Xueqi, Xueqi. Why are you so stupid? You didn't even know what kind of elixir it was before you stole it. You didn't even care about your own life and the safety of the sect." Ruan Hongling's eyes were filled with tears, and her heart was bleeding. In her mind, there was a painful figure shouting loudly, "Why don't you think about yourself? Why can you be so selfless? Don't you know that true love is selfish?" Ruan Hongling shed tears all the way. Along the way, she had to be on guard against anyone who would harm her. Even she didn't know when she had entered the ground of Mount Tianlong in Dongwu City. When she arrived at the foot of the mountain, 3 days and 3 nights had passed. After a spring rain at night, the sky was turning white at this time. In the distant sky, there was a faint trace of warm golden sunlight. This warm light flowed and nurtured in the sky. It seemed to continue a force, as if a red sun would erupt in the next second. Ruan Hongling looked at the cave in the stone room of the Fox Zen School and saw 2 figures standing at the entrance of the cave. One of them was Li Yundong. At this time, Li Yundong was standing motionless at the entrance of the stone cave, his face facing the east. His eyes were closed, and his expression was calm and peaceful. The morning sun shone on his face, making it seem as if it was plated with a thin layer of golden gauze. It made his skin look crystal clear and even more delicate than when he was alive. There was a faint smile on the corner of his mouth, as if he would wake up in the next second and once again laugh and play with the people around him. There was another person next to Li Yundong. It was Su Chan. At this time, Su Chan was holding a clean hot towel in her hand. She carefully washed Li Yundong's face and then wiped his exposed skin. Her movements were slow and gentle, like a gentle and careful wife, for fear that if she used a little more strength, she would hurt her husband. After Su Chan finished wiping Li Yundong's body, she stood by and looked at Li Yundong in a daze. Her eyes did not blink, as if she was a clay figurine in meditation. There was no sadness on the little girl's face. On the contrary, her face was full of happiness and satisfaction. Perhaps in the little girl's eyes, only at this time did Li Yundong completely belong to her. Only at this time did he have time to accompany her alone, until the end of time, 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 until the end of time. Seeing this, Wan Hongling's heart ached again. She knew that even if Li Yundong could not wake up again, Su Chan still had a thought and hope. But what about her Xueqi? What did she have? Wan Hongling suppressed the anger in her heart. She quickly climbed up the mountainside and came to Su Chan's side, shouting, "Su Chan, Su Chan!" But no matter how she shouted, Su Chan never turned her head. She just stared at Li Yundong, as if she could not hear or see anything around her. Wan Hongling shouted a few times. Just as she was about to go forward, she heard a voice not far away. "Stop shouting. She can't hear you. Don't get close to her." Now Su Chan's divine sense has almost been completely sealed. She can only see and hear Li Yundong's voice. Wan Hongling turned her head and saw a cold figure slowly walking out of the depths of the cave. It was Zhou Qin. After not seeing her for a few days, Zhou Qin's whole body was covered with a layer of gloomy aura, as if she was about to transform into a terrible god of slaughter. As long as the last glimmer of hope in the depths of her heart was extinguished, she would immediately transform into Tsing Lam and drag the whole world into the abyss of hell to be buried with Li Yundong. Zhou Qin's face was as cold as frost, and there seemed to be a cyan fire dancing in her eyes. Her eyes were piercingly cold. Only when her eyes fell on Li Yundong did her bone-chilling gaze reveal a slight warmth. Under her gaze, Wan Hongling suddenly felt as if she was in the ice river of hell, and she couldn't help shivering. After Zhou Qin finished speaking, she glanced at Wan Hongling faintly and said, "It's already the third day. Su Chan hasn't eaten, drank, slept, or left. What do you want from her? Where's Zi Yuan? Has she found a way?" At this time, Wan Hongling opened her palm, revealing a pill spinning in her palm. Zhou Qin looked at it and saw that the pill was red, emitting a soft light. Her eyes suddenly widened and she asked in surprise, "What is this?" Wan Hongling suddenly thought of her Xueqi, whose life and death were unknown. She held back the tears that were about to burst out of her eyes and said, "This is the elixir that Xueqi asked me to bring back. It should be able to save Li Yundong." Zhou Qin was ecstatic. She rushed to Wan Hongling like a gust of wind, snatched the elixir from her hand, held it in her hand against the sun, and looked at it carefully. Zhou Qin said in a trembling voice, "What kind of elixir is this? Can it save Master?" Wan Hongling smiled sadly and said, "I don't know. If you don't believe me, then give the elixir back to me. I'll take it." Before she could finish her sentence, she saw Zhou Qin suddenly retract her hand and quickly rush toward Li Yundong. Zhou Qin was now almost desperate. She quickly stuffed the elixir into Li Yundong's mouth with the idea of making a desperate attempt. As soon as the elixir entered Li Yundong's mouth, it immediately melted and turned into liquid, flowing down the corner of his mouth. Su Chan, who was standing to one side, saw this. She picked up the handkerchief in her hand and gently wiped the corner of Li Yundong's mouth. Then, she still looked at Li Yundong with gentle and satisfied eyes, as if she hadn't seen Zhou Qin's actions at all. Zhou Qin looked at Li Yundong nervously, but after staring at him for a long time, she didn't see any reaction from him. The hope in her eyes became fainter and fainter, and the original ecstasy on her face froze little by little, replaced by deep disappointment. But she didn't notice that under Li Yundong's feet, strands of extremely fine black hair were wriggling rapidly, spreading out at an astonishing speed. After a long time, Zhou Qin couldn't help but let out a long sigh when she saw that there was no change in Li Yundong's body. The eyes in her eyes became colder than before. She didn't look at Wan Hongling anymore, turned around, and slowly walked into the stone cave. But just as she took a few steps, she suddenly heard Su Chan exclaim, "Yundong, Yundong, he's awake, he's awake." Zhou Qin was shocked. She immediately turned around and rushed to Li Yundong's side. Wan Hongling also widened her eyes and looked at Li Yundong. The two of them saw that Li Yundong's expression was the same as before, and they couldn't help but be very disappointed. Zhou Qin couldn't help but ask, "Su Chan, how did you know that Master had woken up?" At this time, Su Chan seemed to have come to her senses a little. She could recognize Zhou Qin and Ruan Hongling. She stared at Li Yundong and said in a daze, "I saw it. I just saw his eyelashes twitch." Zhou Qin and Ruan Hongling were skeptical. They just stared at Li Yundong without blinking. They could only see the golden crow rising, crossing the sky, and then landing on the other side. After the sky was replaced by a bright jade rabbit, they gave up. Only Su Chan was still looking at Li Yundong with infatuation. She muttered, "I saw it, I did see it." Zhou Qin closed her eyes in pain and didn't dare to look anymore. Ruan Hongling also stood there in a daze. She didn't know why Li Yundong still couldn't wake up, nor did she know that if this elixir couldn't save Li Yundong, then what was the point of everything Zi Yuan had done? At this time, Su Chan turned her head, smiled at them, and said, "You don't have to worry. Yundong will definitely wake up again. He will definitely wake up again. I'm going to take him home. When he gets home, he will definitely wake up." Zhou Qin and Ruan Hongling heard Su Chan's voice as if she was talking in her sleep, and they couldn't help feeling very sad. In their opinion, Su Chan's deep love had made her lose her mind, so she had said these words. Zhou Qin bit her lip and finally turned to enter the stone cave. After entering the stone cave, she sat down cross-legged in the stone room. Her eyes flashed, crazy and ferocious. At this time, she once again made up her mind. She wanted to improve her cultivation and spiritual energy as quickly as possible, become the strongest cultivator in the world as quickly as possible, and then let all the cultivators in the world who had forced her master be buried with her. Ruan Hongling stood there in a daze. She stared blankly at Zhou Qin's figure disappearing into the dark and deep stone cave. But when she turned her face again, she saw that Su Chan had already flown up with Li Yundong in the direction of Tiannan City. After a while, they turned into a blue light and disappeared. For a moment, only Ruan Hongling was left standing alone at the entrance of the cave of Mount Tianlong. She looked around and saw that the night was dark and the moon was shining brightly. A gust of wind blew, and her figure was sad. She couldn't see her Shiji in front of her, and she couldn't see Li Yundong, who she had been with day and night. In an instant, Ruan Hongling felt incomparable fear and despair. She couldn't help but burst into tears. Chapter 944. The little girl took Li Yundong and flew in the direction of their home. When they arrived at Tiannan City, it was already noon. After the little girl landed in a remote place, she carried Li Yundong on her back as she walked. She seemed to be muttering to herself, but also seemed to be whispering to Li Yundong. Su Chan said in a daze, "Yundong, open your eyes and look. We're back. In the past, I was the one who took you flying. Later, when you became stronger and more powerful, you took me flying. But now, I'm the one who took you flying again." Although the little girl was not short, she looked extremely delicate and weak with Li Yundong on her back. Especially with her amazing beauty, she attracted many people's attention as she walked on the road. Su Chan ignored them along the way and just walked by herself. She walked aimlessly on the streets of Tiannan City with Li Yundong on her back. After walking for an unknown period of time, she suddenly found that she had come to the place where she had met and fallen in love with Li Yundong. It was also the rented house that she and Li Yundong had been kicked out of. The little girl raised her head and looked at the small house that had witnessed so many laughter and tears. Looking at the kitchen that had been blown up and repaired, she couldn't help but have tears in her eyes. Su Chan turned her head, wiped away her tears, and said to Li Yundong, "Yundong, look, where are we? Don't you want to open your eyes and take a look?" Li Yundong quietly lay on Su Chan's shoulder with his eyes closed, as if he was sleeping soundly. However, Su Chan seemed to have heard his thoughts. She said with a smile, "You don't want to? Then I'll tell you and you'll listen, okay?" With that, the little girl climbed upstairs with Li Yundong on her back. She came to the door of the room where she and Li Yundong used to live and knocked gently. After a while, she heard footsteps coming from inside, and a girl opened the door. This girl was none other than the first batch of Tiannan University students who had worked in the Desanxian. Naturally, she had seen Li Yundong and Su Chan before, so when she suddenly saw them, she was shocked and stood at the door at a loss. She didn't know whether to call Li Yundong boss, Su Chan lady boss, or something else. Su Chan smiled at the girl and said, "I'm sorry to disturb you. I used to live here with Yundong. I want to take him to see this place again. Is that okay?" The girl seemed a little timid and didn't dare to make a sound. However, the other girl who heard the commotion in the room and came out to take a look reacted very quickly. She quickly said, all right. Please do as you wish." As he spoke, he pulled his companion to the side and shouted in a low voice, "Are you stupid? Even the boss and the lady boss were in a daze? Not to mention coming in to take a look. Even if he wanted to take a fancy to this house, it would only take one sentence." "What a blockhead. What do you think Li Yundong and his girlfriend are doing here?" the girl said in a low voice. "Besides, I didn't know that they used to live here." The other girl rolled her eyes at her and said, "Why do you care? Rich people are happy." "Oh, so the boss used to live here? Well, in the future I will have something to show off to others. They will envy me to death. Do you want to see Li Yundong's former residence? Okay, pay." The girl couldn't help laughing and scolding in a low voice. "You only care about money. You really stink of money." The two of them were whispering, but Su Chan and Li Yundong were sitting quietly in the living room. She whispered in Li Yundong's ear everything that had happened here, as if she wanted to wake Li Yundong up through these things. At first, the two girls were still whispering to each other, but gradually, they pricked up their ears and listened to Su Chan whispering about her past with Li Yundong. The more they listened, the more moved they became. When they heard that Li Yundong and Su Chan had been kicked out of the house and lived on the streets, relying on each other for survival, the two girls couldn't help but burst into tears. For a moment, they forgot about the gossips. After Su Chan told Li Yundong all these things in detail, she saw that he was still sitting next to her calmly with his eyes closed, motionless. She said, "Yundong, you haven't heard enough, have you? Then I'll take you to other places. Okay?" After saying that, she carried Li Yundong out of the door again. She didn't say goodbye to the two girls and just went on her own. The two girls seemed to be enchanted. They followed Su Chan in their pajamas and slippers and went out the door. Not long after, Su Chan took Li Yundong to a small hotel. It was the small hotel where Li Yundong and she had stayed for a night. The two of them stayed for a while, then turned around and went to the community where they had met Ruan Hongling. She walked with Li Yundong on her back, talking all the way, and the two girls followed her in a daze. As they walked, they wiped their tears. Su Chan carried Li Yundong on her back and broke into the places where they had lived and stayed before. Although it was rude, her beauty was amazing, and there was a heartbreaking sadness hidden between her brows at this time, so no one cared about her. On the contrary, after hearing Su Chan's whispered story, although some people didn't understand what had happened, they just quietly looked at Su Chan and Li Yundong, who was like a vegetable, and felt that there was a kind of soul-stirring power in these two people, which made their eyes sting and they couldn't help but want to cry with them. Along the way, the little girl was slowly followed by a lot of people. These people seemed to be under some kind of witchcraft, and they all followed her and Li Yundong in a daze. When the little girl talked about the funny parts of the two of them, they laughed together, but when she talked about sad tears, they all burst into tears, which stunned the passers-by. They didn't know how long they had been like this. When they arrived at a spacious road, a rather luxurious sports car suddenly stopped beside them. A fashionably dressed girl wearing big sunglasses on her face opened her cherry mouth and looked at Su Chan and Li Yundong with a puzzled expression. She wanted to go over and greet them, but she had some misgivings. She could only pull a girl behind them and ask, "What happened here? Why are you following Li Yundong and Su Chan?" The girl wiped her tears and told her what she had seen and heard before, but she didn't expect that the girl, who looked extremely fashionable, would also cry. Especially at the moment when she pushed away her sunglasses and wiped her tears, the girl suddenly found that the beauty in front of her was very similar to the big star Lu Feier. Just as she was about to ask more questions, she saw Su Chan carrying Li Yundong on her back and heading somewhere else. She hesitated for a moment, then turned around and continued to follow the crowd, leaving Lu Feier's matter behind. Lu Feier didn't expect that after she returned to China, she wouldn't be able to contact Xueqi several times. She had to drive to find Xueqi by herself, but she didn't expect to meet Su Chan and Li Yundong on the side of the road. She stood by the side of the road and hesitated for a moment. In the end, she gritted her teeth, turned off the car's engine, and quietly followed the crowd. Although half of Lu Feier's face was covered by sunglasses, half of her round and smooth face could still be seen. It was obvious that she was an extremely stunning beauty. In addition, she was dressed like a star. In the past, wherever she went, she would be the focus of attention. But at this time, she was following behind the crowd, but everyone's eyes were fixed on Su Chan and Li Yundong. No one noticed that there was an idol star beside them. The group followed Su Chan and Li Yundong to the amusement park in Tiannan City. Su Chan, who was in the lead, walked inside with Li Yundong on her back. The guard at the door saw a large group of people walking in noisily. He didn't even buy a ticket and quickly stopped them from entering. At this time, Lu Feier quickly rushed to buy a ticket, and the guard let them in. Su Chan carried Li Yundong to the bottom of the space shuttle. She quietly waited for everyone to get off before she took Li Yundong to sit on it. At this time, she didn't say anything. She just sat quietly, tilted her head, and looked at Li Yundong, who was sitting quietly with her, like a stone statue in meditation. It was already 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. The sky was covered with clouds, and the rays of the sun shone on the ground through the clouds. It was as if Su Chan and Li Yundong were covered with a layer of colorful gauze, which was very beautiful. The two of them didn't say a word, but their lingering gazes said thousands of words. At this time, the people who followed them all held their breath. No one dared to speak loudly. Gradually, the surroundings became extremely quiet. Many people stood to the side, quietly watching the couple. They didn't know how long it had been like this. Some people felt that time was as short as a second, but others felt that time was as long as a lifetime. Gradually, the sky darkened, and the people who had been standing quietly by the side began to slowly leave. Lu Feier persisted until the sun finally disappeared in the sky. She sighed secretly and turned to leave. In the end, she still didn't ask Su Chan and Li Yundong about Xueqi's whereabouts. After everyone left one by one, Su Chan and Li Yundong's figures were gradually covered by the night. The little girl sat on the chair and looked at Li Yundong in a daze. She reached out and wanted to touch Li Yundong's face, but she shrank it back timidly. She said softly, "Yundong, I will wait for you here. No matter when you wake up, I will wait for you, just like my master waited for Wang Yuanshanj." As the little girl spoke, 2 lines of tears slowly flowed down her face. She flipped her hands and pinched her fingers, preparing to seal both herself and Li Yundong like Ao Wushuang had done. She knew that only in this way could Li Yundong's body not rot, and only in this way could she stay with Li Yundong forever until the end of the world. But just as Su Chan was about to do something, the wind and clouds between heaven and earth began to move. In the night, thick clouds slowly drifted over from the far east, and an invisible force surged towards Su Chan from all directions. Tiny golden spots of light quickly drilled into Li Yundong's body. Su Chan didn't notice anything. Just as she was about to recite the incantation, she suddenly heard a very familiar and gentle voice next to her. "If you turn us all into stones, what if someone carves words on our bodies? What will we do? What if we grow grass and worms on our bodies?" Su Chan's body trembled. She turned her face in disbelief. The expression on her face seemed to be about to laugh or cry. She opened her eyes wide and stared at the man beside her, who was looking at her with a smile on his face. If it wasn't Li Yundong, then who was it? Chapter 945. Su Chan stared at Li Yundong with her eyes wide open. She couldn't believe that the man she had been thinking about day and night had really come back. Was it God's blessing, or had a miracle really happened? Su Chan didn't know, and she didn't have time to think about it. At this time, she only felt that her heart was about to explode with joy, and every pore on her body was trembling with ecstasy. Her smile was like a flower, but the tears in her eyes couldn't stop flowing. Su Chan wiped away her tears and reached out to touch Li Yundong's cheek. She said in a trembling voice, "Yundong, is it really you? Did she really see you again?" Li Yundong looked at the little girl lovingly, reached out, held Su Chan's soft hand, and said softly, "Silly, it's meal. You're not mistaken." Su Chan pouted and finally burst into tears. She threw herself into Li Yundong's arms and cried loudly, "I knew you wouldn't leave me alone. It's very pitiful for you to be alone." He gently patted Su Chan's back with a gentle smile on his face. He carefully wiped away the crystal tears on Su Chan's cheeks, as if the person in front of him was a fragile porcelain doll, and if he used a little more strength, the porcelain doll would shatter. Li Yundong said with a smile, "Don't be silly. I've already said that no matter what you become, I won't abandon you, right? Am I a man of my word?" How could Su Chan still say anything? At this time, she was already crying and laughing, and she could only nod vigorously. At this time, Li Yundong looked around and found that he was actually in the amusement park of Tiannan City. He couldn't help but be stunned and asked curiously, "Why am I here?" What happened after that? Su Chan wiped her tears and told her what had happened after Li Yundong's death. However, she had been in a state of completely sealing off her divine sense for a period of time. She didn't even know that Zi Yuan had stolen the elixir for Li Yundong, and that Wan Hongling had fed Li Yundong the elixir. It was only when she saw Li Yundong's eyelids move slightly that she suddenly woke up from the state of sealing off her divine sense. Li Jiandong quietly listened to Su Chan talk about what had happened after his death. After hearing it, he couldn't help but say, although the mystical silver fox is a devil, she is indeed a strange woman who keeps her promise. She has the courage to challenge the gods and Buddhas of heaven with her own strength. She is magnificent. Su Chan looked at Li Yunyang with admiration and said softly, but I think that you stepped forward bravely and scattered the gods and Buddhas with your own strength. That's the real heroic feat. Li Yundong chuckled and poked the tip of Su Chan's nose with his finger. No matter how great a hero is, he won't be able to overcome the charms of a beauty like you. Su Chan smiled foolishly. She snuggled up in Li Yundong's arms sweetly and happily, feeling his strong heartbeat and warmth. She said softly, I really can't believe you're back. As she said this, she raised her head and looked at Li Yundong. Yundong, why did you wake up at this time? Li Yundong thought for a while and said, I don't know. I smashed my yang spirit with one palm. Although I buried the seed of the true method in your body before, so it's not surprising that my broken yang spirit clone can be reunited. My palm also damaged my internal organs and the upper dantian of my brain. If the interior of the body furnace is damaged, it's reasonable to say that it's impossible to resurrect, unless... As he spoke, Li Yundong suddenly seemed to think of something, but it was vague and he couldn't grasp it. He couldn't help asking, by the way, where's Zi Yuan? What about Zhou Qin? What about the others? Su Chan exclaimed and said, they should still be on Mount Tianlong in Dongwu City, right? Yundong, let's go and tell them the good news. They must be very sad. Li Yundong smiled and nodded at her. The two of them quickly flew towards Tiannan City hand in hand. On the other side, after Su Chan and Li Yundong flew away, Wan Hongling cried alone in the same place for a while. She finally stopped crying, only to see that Lin Miao was looking at her with tears in her eyes. Lin Miao held back her tears and said, don't cry. In the future you still have to walk the path alone. However, Wan Hongling cried even harder. She didn't appreciate Lin Miao's kindness at all. She turned her head and shouted at her. What do you know? You don't know anything. After that, her figure flashed and disappeared in an instant. Wan Hongling cried as she flew. Even she didn't know where she was going. After losing Shiji Zi Yuan, she suddenly felt that the world had darkened in an instant. She didn't know how she was going to face this world and how she was going to survive. While Wan Hongling was feeling helpless, she unconsciously found that she had flown to the ground of Mount Longhu. She looked down and saw the winding Mount Longhu lying on the divine land under her feet. It was majestic and majestic. She stood in the air for a while, then suddenly gritted her teeth and landed on Mount Longhu. Wan Hongling carefully hid her figure along the way. She bypassed the main gate of the main peak of Mount Longhu, and came to a place not far from the back of the mountain. She looked up at the place where the Sanju formation had been, only to see that the cliff was overgrown with bushes and rocks. There was no sign of the formation at all. She couldn't help but be shocked. She became more and more nervous and flustered, and her imagination ran wild. Wan Hongling was about to fly out when she suddenly heard a rustling sound next to her. She was immediately shocked and shrank back, hiding in the bushes, holding her breath and looking calmly. She saw a beautiful little Taoist nun walking slowly on the mountain path. This little Taoist nun was as beautiful as the moon and as beautiful as a flower. It was Zhang Lufeng. Zhang Lufeng had been punished to patrol the mountain because of her previous mistakes. At this time, she was patrolling around the mountain with one of her Xixiang, but unexpectedly, her Xixiang had to go to the toilet halfway, so she had to leave first with a look of disgust. But Zhang Lufeng didn't expect that under the eyes of the main peak of Mount Longhu, she would meet Wan Hongling, who had broken into the Sanju formation and quietly returned after escaping. Zhang Lufeng only felt a flash of a figure next to her and a strong wind. She subconsciously leaned to one side, only to see a red light flash in front of her. A tassel-like red handkerchief stood horizontally in front of her. The edge of the handkerchief was like a blade, and it was placed on her neck, making her hair stand on end. Zhang Lufang was so scared that she was about to scream, but she heard Wan Hongling's voice coming from behind her. Tell me, where is my Shiji Zi Yuan? What did you do to her? Only then did Zhang Lufang realize that the person behind her was Wan Hongling. Although her cultivation was higher than Wan Hongling's, it wasn't much higher. In particular, Wan Hongling had a powerful magical weapon in her hand that was not inferior to the 9th Heaven Zi Yuan silk. In addition, it was a sneak attack, so she was hit without any suspense and was forced to fight back by Wan Hongling. After Zhang Lufang recognized the person, she calmed down a little and said in surprise, Wan Hongling? Why are you back again? Didn't you say that you had run away? Where is the sun and moon flowing elixir? Wan Hongling gritted her teeth and said murderously, Don't talk nonsense. Where is my Shiji? What did you do to her? Is she dead or alive now? Wan Hongling's murderous intent rose in her heart. As long as Zhang Lufang said the news of Zi Yuan's death, she would immediately kill Zhang Lufang in front of her. Fortunately, Zhang Lufang pointed at the cliff of the main peak with a pale face and said quickly, Zhenren Zi Yuan is sealed in the Sanju Formation. But I don't know whether she's dead or alive now. Wan Hongling turned her head to look, and her heart was filled with grief and anger. The killing intent in her eyes couldn't help but grow stronger. When Zhang Lufang saw this, her heart suddenly skipped a beat. She quickly said, Don't worry. Although Zhenren Zi Yuan is trapped in the formation, her spiritual power is profound. I think she should be fine for a while. Why don't we find someone else and see if we can rescue her? Wan Hongling's body shook slightly, and the murderous intent in her eyes suddenly dissipated a lot. She looked at Zhang Lufang doubtfully and asked, Are you willing to rescue my Shiji? As she said this, her eyes suddenly became fierce again. You're not lying to me, are you? Are you trying to lure me into a trap? Zhang Lufang quickly waved her hand and said, No. I've always admired Zhenren Zi Yuan very much. How can a great master and beauty like her be locked up in such a formation for the rest of her life? Wan Hongling glared at Zhang Lufang. Although she was still fierce, her murderous aura had gradually subsided. She said coldly, All right then. I believe you. I'll go look for her now, but you have to come with me. Zhang Lufang complained in her heart, but she had to show a look of joy on her face. She nodded and said, Okay, but you must find a master, otherwise you won't be able to rescue her. Wan Hongling's face was livid. In an instant, she thought of all the masters in the world, but after thinking about it, there was only one person left with a high cultivation quotient who was willing to help her. Zhou Qin. Wan Hongling turned her wrist, grabbed Zhang Lufang, and pulled her into the air. Her powerful magical weapon was still tightly pressed against Zhang Liufang's neck, not relaxing at all. Zhang Lufang sighed in her heart and had no choice but to fly up with Wan Hongling. She looked down at the ground, only to see that her Shixiang, who had gone to the toilet before, had already come over. After looking around for a while and finding that she was gone, he was so angry that he stamped his feet and scolded, Little Shimmy, you've just been punished, yet you left your post without permission. Do you want to be locked up? Come out quickly, or I'll tell Uncle Master. 1, 2, 3. Okay, if you don't come out, I'll tell Uncle Master. This time, Zhang Lufang even wanted to die. She looked at Wan Hongling aggrievedly and wanted to say something, but in the end, she swallowed her words. She glanced at the Dharma treasure on her neck and had no choice but to obediently fly out with Wan Hongling. The two of them flew all the way from Mount Longhu back to Mount Tianlong in Dongwu City. Wan Hongling was about to fly into the cave to find Zhou Qin when she suddenly saw two people flying over from the opposite side. They were holding hands, looking extremely intimate. This was no small matter. Wan Hongling was so shocked that she was dumbfounded. She rubbed her eyes with all her might, but when she confirmed it, she immediately looked at the two people who were extremely intimate with each other. Anger rose in her heart, and evil grew in her heart. Wow, my Shixiang is in danger because of you, and you are actually being intimate with someone here. Damn it! Wan Hongling's eyes turned red. She gritted her teeth and rushed toward Li Yunyang aggressively. Chapter 946. Wan Hongling rushed to Li Yundong angrily, but just as she was about to speak, Su Chan saw her at a glance and immediately smiled like a flower. She came up to her, took her hand intimately, and said with a big smile, Hongling, look, Yundong is back. He's really back. Su Chan's eyes were like crescent moons when she smiled, and her eyebrows were even more curved. There was an indescribable joy in the corners of her eyes, and her cheeks seemed to be shining with the light of happiness. She was born beautiful, and her skin was delicate and pink. At this time, there seemed to be a soft halo flowing on her face. It was really pitiful, let alone an old servant. Ruan Hongling's heart was filled with anger, but seeing Su Chan looking at her with such a happy expression and eyes, how could she do it? For a moment, Ruan Hongling didn't know whether she should cry or laugh. Her expression was stiff and she couldn't speak for a long time. Su Chan looked at her in confusion. Hongling? What happened to you? Ruan Hongling stared at Su Chan, and after a while, she looked at Li Yundong. As she stared at him, tears flowed out of her eyes. Li Yundong also looked at her in confusion and asked curiously, Hongling, what's wrong with you? What happened? Su Chan was still a little confused. She asked curiously, Hongling, is there something bothering you? Or are you too happy to see Yundong wake up again? Ruan Hongling smiled. Her smile was extremely complicated. Of course I'm happy. After saying that, she wiped away her tears and turned to leave. Su Chan looked at her back blankly and opened her mouth, but she didn't know what to say. Li Yundong looked at her lonely figure and suddenly thought of something. He suddenly said loudly, Hongling, where is Zi Yuan? Where is she? Ruan Hongling's body shook. She turned her head, and unconsciously, her face was already covered in tears. She said, Do you still remember Shiji Zi Yuan? Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat, and he felt that something was wrong. Just as he was about to step forward and ask carefully, he suddenly heard a cry of ecstasy coming from under his feet. Master, master. Li Yundong looked down and saw Lin Miao standing at the entrance of the stone room of the Fox Zen school, waving at him vigorously, jumping, crying, and laughing. Lin Miao hadn't expected that she would be able to see Li Yundong come back again. In her ecstasy, she couldn't help shouting loudly. However, in her excitement, she didn't pay attention to her feet. She stepped on the cliff at the entrance of the cave, tilted her body, and fell down. Although she also had a rare constitution created by the elixir, she had not yet started cultivating. Not to mention Shentong magic, she didn't even know the most basic chi flight. This fall immediately scared her to death. Just as she was about to scream, she suddenly felt her body sink, and two strong arms hugged her. Lin Miao turned her head and saw that Li Yundong had already flown back to the entrance of the stone cave with her in his arms. She blushed and looked at Li Yundong, speechless. When she finally took a deep breath and wanted to speak, a figure rushed out of the stone cave like a gust of wind and threw herself into Li Yundong's arms. She beat him and burst into tears. It was Zhou Qin. It was Zhou Qin. It was the first time that Lin Miao had seen her, who was usually a little cold, cry like this. For a moment, she was a little stunned and couldn't help but step aside. She watched Zhou Qin cry in Li Yundong's arms with some emotion. At first, Li Yundong still opened his hands, not knowing whether he should hold Zhou Qin or not. However, after glancing at Su Chan, he saw that the little girl was smiling sweetly at him, her eyes full of trust and joy. His heart warmed, so he tightened his hands, gently patted Zhou Qin's back, and said softly, Don't cry. I'm back again, aren't I? Zhou Qin was a woman who was extremely good at controlling her emotions in public and was extremely good at patience. She was like a snow mountain, and all the accumulation was sealed and frozen under the white snow. The more it accumulated, the more it would suddenly burst out at a certain time. Zhou Qin's cry was full of grievance and fear, as if she wanted to vent all the accumulated emotions in her heart. She cried so hard that Su Chan and Lin Miao, who were beside her, were also infected. They cried until their eyes were hazy. Only Ruan Hongling, who was beside them, also had tears in her eyes, but she bit her lip tightly, her eyes full of unwillingness and grievance. Li Yundong gently hugged Zhou Qin and let her cry loudly in his arms. He knew that Zhou Qin must have been extremely depressed and painful in the past few days. He could even imagine that if he really left her behind, she would definitely go crazy and even become another she-devil. After crying for a long time, Zhou Qin gradually calmed down. She gently pushed Li Yundong away with both hands, wiped her tears, and then stood aside. She said softly, choking with sobs, Master, you can't do it again. If there is a next time, no matter what the situation is, I will die with you. As the saying goes, A hero's spirit is short. Li Yundong's spiritual energy was divine and he was a hero, but he couldn't stand the infatuation words of a girl. He sighed and shook his head, not knowing what to say. At this time, Zhang Lufeng couldn't help but lean over. Ruan Hongling had rushed toward Li Yundong aggressively, and her personal powerful magical weapon had also flown over with her. Zhang Lufeng suddenly lost control, but she forgot to escape for a moment. She just stared at Li Yundong with her eyes wide open. Although she hadn't been able to come to Mount Tianlong to participate in this unprecedented battle, Zhang Lufeng had heard countless people talk about how Li Yundong had risked his life to save Su Chan in the end. For this reason, Zhang Lufeng had shed many tears and been laughed at by her Shixiang. In Zhang Liufeng's mind, Li Yundong had risked his life for Su Chan, which made his image reach a perfect realm. He was even the greatest Casanova since ancient times. However, after Zhang Lufeng gave Li Yundong the title of a perfect Casanova, she found out that he was not dead. What the hell is going on? In an instant, Zhang Liufeng's mind was full of question marks, and her eyes almost fell out of their sockets. Zhang Lufeng couldn't help but stare at Li Yundong and stammered. Li Yundong, aren't you dead? I heard that your palm hit the top of your head, and the cauldron's yang spirit has been destroyed. How can you still come back to life like this? As she said this, Zhang Lufeng suddenly came to her senses. She pointed at Li Yundong and stammered, You can't. Li Yundong smiled and said, Can't what? You don't want to say that I'm a ghost, do you? Zhang Lufeng stamped her feet and said, Who thinks you're a ghost? Do ghosts have such strong yang qi? Tell me, did you eat the sun and moon flowing elixir and come back to life? That's the most precious treasure of our Zhengyi school. You actually ate it. Li Yundong was stunned and asked in confusion, Sun and moon flowing elixir? You mean the sun and moon flowing elixir in the deed of Xueqi comprehension? When did your Zhengyi school refine such a divine elixir? As he spoke, he suddenly thought of something and couldn't help but say in a low voice, That's right. When I can feel the existence of my consciousness and soul again, it's also because I can feel that my body has once again produced heat in the cauldron. That's why I can come back to life. Could it be, if a cultivator wanted to come back to life, there were two prerequisites. The first was that he had to have a host, a body cauldron that could accommodate the soul of the divine sense. If a damaged or dead body cauldron contained the soul of the strongest divine sense in the world, it would probably die of natural causes not long after. This was because the decay and death of the body was irreversible, and it could not be changed by the power of magic or zhenqi. No matter how powerful a cultivator was, it was impossible for him to cultivate his body to the point where it was truly invulnerable and impervious to water and fire, and it was even more impossible for him to cultivate his body to the point where he would never die. But even if there was an intact body cauldron, if their souls and divine senses were scattered in all directions, it would be useless. Li Yundong's yang spirit soul was also an extremely powerful force between heaven and earth. In the past, because of the existence of the Niden in the body cauldron, even if it was scattered into hundreds of millions of clones, it could still be gathered and rebuilt with his Niden as the center. However, once the body was destroyed and the yang spirit was smashed, these yang spirits would lose their focus and could no longer gather together. After a long time, they would slowly scatter and eventually break down and melt in the universe, becoming a drifting force without a master, or being assimilated by more powerful energy. However, because Li Yundong had received Zhang Zhishuan's teaching, he had comprehended the infinite void and the realm of the unity of heaven and man. Therefore, he had placed his true method brand on Su Chan early. Such a true method brand was equivalent to a road sign. If his yang spirit soul was smashed one day, as long as the cauldron was still there and the Niden could still gather and operate, his soul and yang spirit would be able to follow his true method brand and find home, again according to this road sign. The way home. This was also why when all the gods and Buddhas saw Li Yundong shatter his yang spirit with one palm and destroy his body cauldron, they all believed that he was dead. They turned around and returned to the heaven realm, no longer making things difficult for him and the people around him. Li Yundong knew that if he wanted to be resurrected, his body cauldron would have to be recast and resurrected again. However, it was easy to say, but it was as difficult as ascending to heaven. It was absolutely impossible without earth-shattering events. Thinking of this, Li Yundong thought of Ruan Hongling's performance before. Then he saw that everyone was here except Zi Yuan. His heart suddenly shrank into a ball. Li Yundong's pupils suddenly shrank. He quickly rushed over to Ruan Hongling, grabbed her arm with both hands and shouted, "Where is Zi Yuan? How is she? She stole the sun and moon flowing elixir, didn't she?" Yuan Hongling finally couldn't help it. She burst into tears and shouted hoarsely, "Have you finally found out? Have you finally found out that she is gone? For you, she even gave up her life. For you, she didn't hesitate to betray the Zhengyi school, betray her sect, and give up everything." As she spoke, Yuan Hongling bit her lip hard, and tears rolled down her face. "Li Yundong, answer me. The relationship between you and Suchan is true. Isn't Zi Yuan's love for you also true? Do you know how much she sacrificed for you? Do you still remember?" Every word of Yuan Hongling was like a sledgehammer, hitting Li Yundong's soft heart heavily. In an instant, his mind was buzzing, and Yuan Hongling's words kept echoing in his mind. "The relationship between you and Suchan is true. Isn't Zi Yuan's love for you also true?" Li Yundong had been deliberately avoiding this question, but now, he was completely forced into a corner. He had the supernatural power of heaven and earth, shocking wisdom and knowledge, and a demeanor that made people admire and worship him. But even a person like him couldn't help but feel like he was on a cliff on a lonely island. He looked around blankly and kept asking himself in his heart, "Yes, what should I do? What am I supposed to do?" Chapter 946. A Word Awakens. A Dreamer text updates fastest. A. Chapter 947. Li Yundong stood there in a daze. After a long while, he let out a long sigh and said, "Hongling, I understand what you said, but..." Just as he was at a loss for words, a warm and soft body suddenly snuggled up to him. Li Yundong turned his head and saw that it was Suchan. Suchan opened her big bright eyes and said softly, "Yundong, think about how to save Sister Zi Yuan first." Li Yundong was shocked. He looked at Suchan with gentle eyes and asked softly, "Don't you mind?" Suchan shook her head and then nodded. She smiled slightly and said, "Sister Zi Yuan has helped us so much. If it weren't for her, you wouldn't have been able to survive. No matter what, we should save her, shouldn't we?" Li Yundong felt a little relieved. He let out a long breath, turned to Yuan Hongling, and said, "Hongling, don't worry. I will definitely save Zi Yuan." Zhou Qin, who was standing to one side, was also afraid that Li Yundong and Suchan would have a conflict because of this matter. Seeing that Suchan was so righteous, she was also overjoyed. She rubbed her hands and said, "Master, the Zhengyi school has made trouble for us again and again. This time, we can settle the score with them." Zhang Liufeng's heart sank when she heard this. She was a disciple of the Zhengyi school, so she naturally had to speak up for the Zhengyi school. She immediately cried out in grievance and said loudly, "Zhenren Zhou Qin, your words are really unreasonable. Even if Zi Yuan stole the sun and moon flowing elixir to save people, it is still a felony of theft and apostasy. Moreover, the sun and moon flowing elixir is the most precious treasure of our Zhengyi school. Without it, our Zhengyi school will have a big problem. Even if we stole it to cure the disease and save people, it is still stealing. No matter what excuse we have to kill people, killing people is killing people, and they must be punished. Our Zhengyi school didn't make trouble for you, but you want to make trouble for us? What's the reason?" Zhang Lufeng was young and aggressive, so she immediately regretted her words. She was afraid that Li Yundong and the others would get angry and kill her, the insider, regardless of their previous friendship. She looked over and saw that Zhou Qin's eyebrows were gradually raised, and her whole body was full of murderous intent. Zhang Lufeng was so scared that her heart was beating wildly. She pointed at Zhou Qin and said, Hey, calm down. What do you want to do?" "Murder. Someone wants to kill me to silence me." Li Yunyang saw Zhang Lufeng shouting and jumping up and down. Her delicate voice could almost be heard throughout Mount Tianlong. If it weren't for the fact that there was no one near the mountain at this time, it would have immediately attracted a lot of attention. He said to Zhang Lufeng with a wry smile, "Stop shouting. Who said I was going to kill you?" Zhang Lufeng saw that Li Yundong wanted to protect her, so she quickly hid behind him and said loudly, "Li Yundong, you can't be so heartless. I've helped you a lot. You can't hurt me. Besides, do you really have the heart to lay your hands on an innocent, cute, lively and beautiful little girl like me?" Li Yundong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Are you doing a monologue? Did I say I was going to kill you?" Zhang Lufang poked her head out from behind Li Yundong and glared at Zhou Qin rudely. She then made a face at her and said, She just looked at me fiercely and wanted to kill me. Li Yundong, she is your disciple. You have to control her. Li Yundong pretended to be angry and glared at Zhou Qin. Zhou Qin straightened her neck and said, No matter what, let Xueqi school release her as soon as possible. If they don't, Although Zhang Lufang admired Li Yundong very much, she was, after all, an inner disciple of Xueqi school. At this time, the relationship between them was reflected. She shouted angrily, Zhenren Zhou, do you really think that our Xueqi school is easy to bully? Zhou Qin snorted and glanced at her contemptuously, not saying anything. When Li Yundong saw that the two of them immediately quarreled because of a disagreement, he suddenly felt a little headache. He said, Okay, stop arguing. Zhou Qin, I'll deal with this matter. What Zhang Lufang said makes sense. Although Zi Yuan did it to save me, no matter what, she did violate the rules of Xueqi school. If we go to their door, not only will we be in the wrong, but it will also cause turmoil in the Chinese cultivation world, making our loved ones suffer and our enemies happy. Hearing Li Yundong's words, Zhou Qin said helplessly, Master, if we don't do this, how can we save Zi Yuan? Do we have to go to their door and beg them to let her go? Master, what is your identity and status now? How can you do such a thing? If it doesn't work, I'll go and beg them to let her go, okay? You can't go. At this time, Su Chan also said, Yundong, I'll go too. I believe that our sincerity can move the leader of Xueqi school. Last time I saw Zhang Tianshi, he didn't seem to be an unreasonable person. Li Yundong sighed, shook his head, and said, You don't know how difficult it is to be a leader if you don't want to be one. As a sect leader, the most important thing is to keep your word. If you make such a big mistake, and someone comes to ask for leniency, you raise the board high, then put it down lightly and let it go. Then, who would take the sect rules seriously in the future? These words made Su Chan and Zhou Qin look at each other. Zhang Lufang nodded vigorously like a chick pecking at rice. She had completely forgotten that Zhang Ling had tried every means possible to get Zhang Tianhe and herself off the hook. Zhou Qin said with a troubled expression, Master, neither soft nor hard methods work. What should we do? Li Yundong pondered for a while, then suddenly raised his head and said with a smile, I have a way. Su Chan and the others looked at Li Yundong in confusion, wanting to know what he could do. However, Li Yundong just smiled and didn't say anything. He waved to Zhou Qin and said, Zhou Qin, you have to help me with this matter. Come here, I'll tell you. Zhou Qin moved closer in confusion and leaned over to listen. Zhang Lufang, who was standing to one side, rolled her eyes and stretched her head to look over, but Zhou Qin glared at her and shouted, What are you doing? Do you want to tell them? Zhang Lufang was startled and subconsciously shrank back, but soon she puffed out her chest and said, Not to be outdone, I'm in your hands. How can I tell them? How can I tell them? Tell me, tell me. Zhou Qin was so angry that she gritted her teeth. She was about to speak, but Li Yundong pulled her arm and said with a smile, That's enough. You're not young anymore. How can you argue with a child? Zhou Qin had to give up and glared at Zhang Lufang with hatred. However, Zhang Lufang was proud, like a general who had won a battle. She raised her chin to the sky, but her ears were always pricked up, listening to what Li Yundong and Zhou Qin were saying. After Li Yundong whispered something in Zhou Qin's ear, Zhou Qin was a little confused at first, but the more she listened, the bigger her eyes became. After listening, she was stunned and couldn't speak for a long time. After a long time, she turned her head and stammered, Master. This doesn't seem to be good, does it? It's too exaggerated, isn't it? Li Yundong smiled slightly and said, Xueqi school is an important Taoist sect in the Chinese cultivation world, and Celestial Master Zhang is also one of the best masters in the Chinese cultivation world. If we have a head-on conflict with Xueqi school, it will be a fight between two tigers, and one of them will be injured. Now is the end of Dharma in the cultivation world. If we fight among ourselves, we will really destroy ourselves. I don't want to see such a situation. Therefore, at present, the best way to avoid serious conflicts between the two sides is this. Zhou Qin's expression was strange. She looked at Li Yundong strangely, as if she hadn't expected that the great master in front of her, who could force all the gods and Buddhas to scatter with one palm, would come up with such an unprecedented bad idea. Although Su Chan, Lin Miao, Ruan Hongling, and Zhang Lufeng each had their own thoughts, they couldn't help but be curious when they saw Zhou Qin's reaction at this time. They all asked, "What is it? Tell us quickly, let's hear it." At this time, Zhou Qin couldn't help but smile slightly and say, "Don't ask me, ask Master." She turned her face and said to Li Yundong, "Master, I'll go down the mountain first to prepare something." Li Yundong smiled and nodded at her. "Go ahead. Take Lin Miao with you. She can also help." Lin Miao was overjoyed. She quickly stepped forward and took Zhou Qin's arm, eagerly asking what Li Yundong had said to her. Zhou Qin held back her laughter and told Lin Miao. Lin Miao's expression also became extremely strange, and she looked at Li Yundong strangely. Although Ruan Hongling had been full of unhappiness before, after saying these words, she had vented a lot of her emotions. In addition, she had a good relationship with Lin Miao and Zhou Qin. At this time, she was curious and couldn't care less. Seeing the two of them leave, she couldn't help but chase after them. "Hey, wait for me, I'll go with you." After chasing after them, she immediately asked, her voice coming from afar, "Hey, what the hell is going on? Tell me, tell me. If you don't tell me, we'll break off our relationship." If Su Chan had been in the past, she would have been so anxious and curious that she would have thrown herself into Li Yundong's arms and acted like a spoiled child. She would not give up until she got to the bottom of the matter. However, after she and Li Yundong had parted ways, she had matured a lot in an instant. Many things in the past had suddenly become indifferent to her. She only felt that as long as she could be with Li Yundong and they loved each other, she didn't care about anything else. Although Su Chan was curious, she just smiled and watched Zhou Qin and Lin Miao whisper to each other as they left. She didn't ask Li Yundong any further. Li Yundong looked at her curiously and couldn't help asking, "Chaner, don't you want to know how I will deal with the Xueqi school?" Su Chan smiled softly, her smile full of happiness and satisfaction. She said, "If you want to tell me, you will take the initiative to tell me. If you don't say it, it's useless for me to ask, right?" Hearing this, Li Yundong sighed with emotion. After all the hardships and twists and turns, the naughty and naive little girl had finally matured and grown up. Her immaturity had gradually faded away, replaced by the flashy precipitation and calmness of someone who had experienced life and death, as well as the ups and downs. Li Yundong pinched the little girl's nose dotingly and said with a smile, "Well, my little girl has finally grown up." Su Chan and Li Yundong looked at each other and smiled sweetly. The two of them were happy and sweet, as if there was no one else around. Only Zhang Lufeng, who was next to them, was the most anxious. She was lively and impatient. She couldn't hide her words, nor could she hold back. She wanted to catch up with them, but she couldn't bring herself to do so. She didn't know how to tell Li Yundong even if she stayed. She was so anxious that she scratched her ears and cheeks, wishing she could drill into Li Yundong's heart and dig out this matter to make it clear. Zhang Lufeng watched Li Yundong and Su Chan being intimate with each other as if there was no one else around. Her pretty little face was as black as the bottom of a pot. She shouted crazily in her heart, "What the hell is this? You can't torture people like this." Chapter 948. Tiannan City. Tiannan University. Compared to the long summer vacation, the winter vacation always passed very quickly, especially for some students who were still immersed in the atmosphere of the new year. When they arrived on campus, it seemed that there was still a holiday atmosphere everywhere. Most of the students were lax and lazy. For some responsible teachers, attending classes during this period of time was simply a great torture. Although the third-year students were about to enter their senior year in another semester, and the precious university career of their lives was about to enter the last year, they were about to face the cruel society. But even so, not many students were aware of the sense of crisis. They were still muddling along in the classroom. The teachers who were lecturing on the podium looked helplessly at the sparse classroom. The large classroom with a few empty seats was like a cornfield that had been visited by a bear. It was tragic and withered, making people really dispirited. No matter how hot-blooded a teacher was, in the face of such a situation, he was afraid that he would not be able to lift his spirits to teach. His voice was soft and weak. Due to the opening and expansion of the Desanxian, almost all the beautiful girls in Li Yundong's class, even those at the department level, had gone to work for the Desanxian. This had also brought about a wave of work craze in the school. Students were unwilling to be outdone and ran out to work. If they couldn't get into the Desanxian, they would go somewhere else. It seemed that if they didn't do this, they would lose face. Although the Desanxian had closed down and reorganized, and the students who worked had nothing to do, the students had tasted the sweetness of getting a salary in society. How many of them were willing to go back and honestly sit in the classroom and learn things? What a joke! What was the point of going to university? Wasn't it just to find a good job? Since they already had a good job, why would they go back to study? Therefore, these students would rather stay at home and be otakus than go back to school to listen to classes. The students who stayed in the classroom to stick to their posts were also distracted. Originally, the teacher was absent-minded. How could they listen to him? Sun Li, the class monitor, had always been a diligent and hard-working student. Every year, she would receive scholarships. But this year, the atmosphere of laziness that permeated the class and faculty had unwittingly affected her, causing her to feel a little dispirited. The shrewish Sichuan Pepper looked out of the window with flagging interest. She kept playing with the pen in her hand, and her eyes flashed. She secretly regretted it. Why had she been so arrogant and refused to go to Desanxian? Now she heard that the students who went to Desanxian had received an astonishing amount of red envelopes during the spring festival. Even a proud person like her could not help but feel excited. I must have been out of my mind to have refused to go. Was it because I couldn't let go of something in my heart, or was it because I couldn't bear to see Li Yundong being intimate with other girls? Sun Li couldn't help but sigh. Thinking back to the short time she had spent with Li Yundong on campus, she couldn't help but smile. But just as she was lost in thought, she suddenly heard a shout. Sun Li! She's talking to you, Sun Li! Sun Li was startled. She thought the teacher had asked her a question. She quickly stood up and flipped through the textbook in front of her in a panic. What? Teacher, I didn't hear what you just said. Could you say it again? The class burst into laughter. A girl sitting behind her kicked her chair and said, Class monitor, Yan Hua from the student council is looking for you. Sun Li was taken aback. She couldn't help but look at the teacher, only to see the teacher looking at her helplessly. The teacher waved at her, gesturing for her to hurry up and leave. Sun Li looked at the door and saw the president of the student council standing there, smiling at her. Sun Li blushed. She excused herself and hurried out of the classroom. After Feng Na left, Yan Hua took over her position. The vice president was replaced by Sun Li, who had just joined the student council not too long ago. This Sichuan little pepper was decisive, quick-witted, and efficient. She had won the trust of the student council and the school leaders. Since Yan Hua often disappeared for no reason, a lot of the student council's affairs were piled on Sun Li's shoulders. As a result, she became one of the most influential people in the student council. Of course, Sun Li had no idea that Yan Hua was no longer Yan Hua. This body that looked like a man actually contained the soul of a woman named Yan Feng. Sun Li walked briskly towards Yan Feng. In her eyes, the president of the student council had become more and more handsome, even though she hadn't seen him for a while. His handsome facial features and the aggressive aura between his brows had all disappeared, replaced by a kind of feminine beauty and grace. If it had been anyone else, they would have already screamed at the president's androgynous beauty. But Sun Li, the Sichuan little pepper, didn't appreciate this kind of trap beauty at all. She muttered to herself that the president of the student council exuded a feminine aura, which made her feel very uncomfortable. This kind of discomfort came purely from a woman's innate sixth sense and a premonition of danger. Especially when she saw the smile on Yan Feng's face, Sun Li felt a chill run down her spine from the depths of her heart. She could feel that the person standing in front of her seemed to be wearing a mask, and under the mask was another strange and terrifying soul. Sun Li suppressed the doubts and unhappiness in her heart and came to Yan Feng's side. The two stood in the corridor of the school building. Sun Li asked, President, what did you want to talk to me about? Yan Feng glanced at her with a smile and said, It's nothing. The teachers of the school council are looking for us. Ever since Yan Feng had castrated herself and started cultivating, her cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds. Almost every day, her body was changing. The original masculine characteristics of her body were gradually changing, replaced by more feminine characteristics. Especially her voice, which had become more and more androgynous, to the point that it was difficult to distinguish her gender. If someone who didn't know her heard her voice, they wouldn't think much of it. After all, in today's society, there were many beautiful female celebrities who spoke in a duck's voice. No one would care about this with a guy who looked like a man. But for those who knew something about Yan Hua, hearing her voice made their hair stand on end. Sun Li suppressed the fear that made her hair stand on end and asked curiously, "Why are the teachers of the school council looking for us? Is there an impromptu meeting? Is it a big one? Who's going to be attending? What do we need to prepare?" Yan Feng smiled. Her face had always been a mask. "I don't know," she said. "I was called at the last minute. It sounds like something important." As the two of them walked down the corridor, they discussed some matters related to the school council. But just as they were about to reach the bottom of the building, a figure suddenly appeared out of the corner of Sun Li's eye. The figure was all too familiar. Sun Li would recognize it even if it had been reduced to ashes. Sun Li's heart skipped a beat. She immediately turned her head to look at the silhouette. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. She rubbed her eyes hard, then stared at the silhouette with wide eyes. After a few seconds, she finally confirmed that her eyes weren't playing tricks on her. "Li Yundong!" Sun Li exclaimed in shock. At that moment, Tiannan University was like a giant hibernation facility. Every student in and out of the classrooms was like a hibernating animal. Even the students walking around the building were few and far between. The entire campus was so quiet that one could almost hear the rustling of leaves in the wind. Sun Li's shout attracted the attention of a few students who had just skipped class to look in her direction. Then, they followed her gaze and looked in the direction of the school gate. What they saw made them jump up in excitement. Some of the quick-witted students immediately snapped a photo with their phones and forwarded it to their friends. Others immediately logged into their Weibo accounts and posted about Li Yundong's appearance on campus. In this age of information technology, the speed at which news spread was unimaginable. Just a second ago, only Sun Li and a handful of other students knew that Li Yundong had returned to Tiannan University. But in the next second, the news spread like wildfire. Almost every student's cell phone started ringing, and almost every class was in an uproar. Then, one after another, school buildings erupted like a volcano. The hibernating Tiannan University suddenly burst into an uproar. Countless students rushed out of the classrooms and dormitories. Their faces were full of excitement, as if they were children who had seen their heroes and idols. Some of them shouted fanatically in the corridors of the teaching building, while others, dressed in a variety of clothes and wearing a pair of slippers, rushed down from the dormitories and converged toward the school gate like a tide. There were even some students who had rented apartments near the school and were sleeping lazily under their blankets. But when they heard the news, they immediately jumped out of their beds, threw on a few random clothes, and sprinted towards the school like madmen. The quiet campus instantly turned into a pot of boiling porridge. The teachers stared at the scene with their mouths agape. As far as they could remember, there had never been a person who could make the students of Tiannan University so spontaneously and fanatically chase after him. All of this was because of one reason. The most legendary figure in the history of Tiannan University had returned after leaving the school for a long time. Sun Li stared at Li Yundong with widened eyes. She was surrounded by students who were rushing past her. Her eyes were filled with surprise, curiosity, and joy. She couldn't understand why Li Yundong would suddenly return to the academy. What was he doing here? Sun Li and the other students were all immersed in the excitement and curiosity of Li Yundong's sudden return. None of them noticed that Yan Feng, who was standing next to her, had an ugly expression on her face and a sinister look in her eyes. Chapter 949. What? Inside the board office of Tiannan University's office building, Sun Li stared at Li Yundong with wide eyes, a look of shock etched on her face. The other teachers and leaders in the office were also at a loss for words. They stared at Li Yundong, dumbfounded. Principal Ku, Director Chen, and the others looked at each other, unable to believe what they had just heard. Director Chen pushed his gold-rimmed glasses up the bridge of his nose and asked cautiously, "Li Yundong, I don't think I misheard you. You want to invite all the teachers and students of Tiannan University for a spring outing?" Li Yundong had become a legendary figure at Tiannan University. Setting aside the fact that he had started his own business, just the fact that he had so many friends was enough to inspire awe and respect in others. Director Chen no longer dared to treat Li Yundong like he used to be. He spoke cautiously and with a smile on his face, afraid that he might provoke the unfathomable boy. Afraid that he had misspoken, Director Chen added. Are you sure you want to invite all the teachers and students of the university? Do you even know how many teachers and students there are at Tiannan University? Li Yundong chuckled and said, I know. There should be thousands of people. Even though Tiannan University was only a third-rate university, it was still open to students from all over the country. Recently, it had been facing an expansion and a relocation to a new campus, so the number of students had increased dramatically. A few thousand was an understatement, but if one were to add up the number of teachers and students from all faculties, there would be at least 10,000 of them. Invite all 10,000 of them for a spring outing? Isn't that a little too much? Would the university still have classes then? Plus, how much manpower and resources would it take? Li Yundong is paying for all this? No way, is this kid really that rich? There's no need to waste it like this, is there? Li Yundong's words startled Director Chen. Like the other teachers, he sucked in a breath of cold air. He stared at Li Yundong as if he was an alien, speechless for a long time. Some of the teachers looked happy, some looked doubtful, and some looked straight at Principal Ku, waiting for his decision. Although Headmaster Ku was a progressive person among people his age, what Li Yundong had said was a little exaggerated. He didn't dare to be careless. After thinking for a long time, he said with an embarrassed face, Li Yundong, I really want to know why you want to do this. I'm a student at Tiannan University, he said with a confident smile. Plus, I was lucky enough to earn some money, so I want to repay my alma mater. I think that's only natural, right? Headmaster Ku, you won't be unreasonable, right? Headmaster Ku didn't know whether to laugh or cry. But this is not how you repay your alma mater, is it? He thought to himself, most of the other students repay their alma mater with donations, but you, on the other hand, encourage everyone to go on a trip. What kind of repayment was this? Why does it look like he's trying to buy people's hearts? And inviting the entire school of more than 10,000 people? Wasn't this too frightening? Would such an organized and disciplined trip attract the attention of certain departments? Although he secretly thought that if Li Yundong really wanted to repay his alma mater, he might as well donate money. Why bother with these useless things? But these words could only be exchanged between the internal organs. It was absolutely impossible to say it out loud. Li Yundong seemed to know what he was thinking and said, Headmaster Ku, don't worry. I've already made preparations in terms of manpower and material resources. This time, I'm here to discuss with the teachers what to do. I've also talked to the city's Ministry of Education. Headmaster Ku, you can rest assured. And this time, I also want to donate a sum of money to the school for the construction of infrastructure, as well as to improve the welfare of teachers and students. Li Yundong's words made Headmaster Ku exclaim in his heart. He thought that Li Yundong was indeed someone who had been out for a while. His words seemed polite, but in fact, they were very impolite. He had made it clear that he was here to discuss with Li Yundong what to do, not whether he could do it or not. Headmaster Ku also knew very well that with Li Yundong's charisma and background, it would probably be a little difficult to fool all the teachers and students in the school, but it would definitely not be a problem to fool 70% to 80% of the students to go out with him for a fun trip. Li Yundong had proved his popularity and prestige in front of them more than once on this campus. He didn't need to prove it at all. Therefore, Li Yundong could completely bypass them and fool the students away. He didn't need to do it for a long time. He just needed to pick a weekend and then fool each of them to go out for 2 or 3 days. In total, it would be 5 or 6 days. Even if someone wanted to make trouble for him and accused him of organizing a large-scale party, they would have to think about the power behind Li Yundong first. For people like Headmaster Ku, what they were most worried about was such a large-scale trip. It was an extremely test of the school's ability to organize. If something happened to any of the students, how could the school bear the responsibility? Headmaster Ku's face was full of hesitation. He really didn't dare to make this decision. If something happened, he wouldn't be able to bear the responsibility even if he killed himself. This was more than 10,000 teachers and students. Li Yundong, you dare to bear the responsibility, but I don't. While he was struggling, the students of the student union who attended the meeting with him were all scratching their heads anxiously. For students like them, they didn't care about the concerns of the teachers. What was the purpose of going to university? To learn knowledge and culture? Bah, whoever said that would be spat on. Wasn't it hard enough to learn knowledge and culture in high school? Wasn't the purpose of going to university to play? At least, this was what the students of Tiannan University thought. This kind of thinking was extremely common. Even most of the cadres of the student union thought the same. Who said that student cadres of the student union must have a higher ideological level? Therefore, while Headmaster Ku was struggling, they were also anxious. They couldn't wait to agree to Li Yundong on his behalf. This was an activity organized by Li Yundong, and it was such a large-scale trip, and it was going to be a long trip. Just thinking about it made them excited. University life was dull and boring. Even the cadres of the student union usually stayed in their dormitories all day, living a boring life of 3 points and 1 line every day. Suddenly hearing such a thing, every cell was excited, and every blood vessel was burning. Some of the cadres of the student union were sitting upright on the surface, but under the table, they were quickly typing on the keyboard of their mobile phones, sending text messages, and broadcasting the situation in the conference room at any time. If others looked at them from the surface, they would only see that they were all serious, but under the table, they were working in full swing. Even Yu Zucheng would probably die of inferiority if he saw their professional performance. While they were broadcasting, the outside of the conference room was packed with people. The corridor was packed with people. Everyone wanted to stick their ears to the door to listen to what was going on inside. Some people kept refreshing their Weibo or anxiously waiting for their text messages. As long as there was news, they would immediately announce it loudly. The whole campus was so lively that it was like a festival. The teachers had collectively chosen to temporarily lose their sight and hearing. So who would dare to control these students? For these students, Li Yundong's return to the school was enough to be a gossip topic for them to talk about for a few days. But suddenly, they heard that Li Yundong was willing to contribute his own money and organize a trip for everyone. This news was like an atomic bomb, blowing up Tiannan University inside and out. No student could remain calm, and no teacher could handle such a scene. The students excitedly and enthusiastically discussed where Li Yundong was going to organize them, but very few people thought about why Li Yundong wanted to organize them to go on a trip. Who cared? As long as they could go out and have fun, and it was free. It would be a waste not to go. Especially when they knew that Principal Ku and the teachers of the school committee were hesitant, the students spontaneously organized together at this time, surrounded the office building, and shouted loudly, "We want to go on a trip, not to class." Thousands of students shouted in unison, their voices shaking the glass of the office building's conference room. The teachers' faces were even paler, and Principal Ku's expression was very ugly. In Principal Ku's view, this was simply a forced abdication. If he could tolerate it, what could he do? The dignity of the teachers and the school committee was gone. Let Li Yundong have his say in the school from now on. If it had been any other ordinary person, Principal Ku was afraid that at this time, he would have immediately rejected this proposal. After all, this situation could not be allowed to spread, and this trend could not be allowed to grow. Otherwise, the school would be closed in the future. But the person in front of him was not ordinary. This was a person who could open a tea shop and alarm the #1 figure of the provincial party committee. In the land of China, people who could climb to a certain position may be despicable, greedy, but absolutely not real fools. Principal Ku quickly calculated the gains and losses in his mind. After a while, he wiped the sweat off his forehead and said, "Li Yundong, on behalf of all the teachers and students of Tiannan City, I would like to express my gratitude for your kindness. Logically speaking, we should be happy to accept, but this is a big event after all, and with so many people traveling at the same time. This is really too." He did not finish his sentence, because he did not know how to say it. Li Yundong quickly understood. He smiled and said, "Headmaster Ku, how about we organize several trips? In this way, the pressure on human and material resources, as well as the organization and management, will be greatly reduced. It will also not affect the normal study and work of the school. What do you think?" Li Yundong's proposal immediately moved almost everyone in the office. The teachers and the members of the student union all whispered to each other. Sun Li looked at the boy sitting across the table, both familiar and strange. After not seeing him for a long time, he had matured a lot. He had a good grasp of the situation at the negotiating table, and was able to advance and retreat at will. First, he threw out a proposal that was almost impossible for the other party to agree to, forcing the other party into a dilemma. Then, when the other party was in pain, He threw out another proposal that was still harsh, but relatively lenient, and immediately tilted the table in his favor. This was not something that a university student who had not even officially graduated could do. After a short discussion, the teachers of the school committee turned to the members of the student council for their opinions. After all, when the time came for the trip, the only people who could really be trusted were the members of the student council and the class leaders. The eyes of the members of the student council had long since lit up, and they could not wait to raise their hands and feet in agreement. Even Yen Fong, whose eyes were shining brightly, had no choice but to raise her hand and approve the proposal. Soon, both the school committee and the student council approved Li Yundong's proposal. The students, who had been waiting for the news, burst into a tsunami of cheers. The cheers were so loud that it was practically earth-shattering. The students spontaneously cheered loudly, "Long live Li Yundong! Long live the teacher!" Hearing the cheers, Principal Ku took off his glasses and carefully wiped them with a cloth. "Li Yundong, there are so many places in the country," he said with a sigh. "Why did you choose this place?" Li Yundong's lips curled into a faint smile. "Dragon Tiger Mountain is a good place," he said meaningfully. Chapter 950. Early in the morning, it had just rained on the ground of Mount Longhu. As the saying goes, the spring rain was moist and crisp. Mount Longhu looked green and lush everywhere. A series of major events had happened on Mount Longhu one after another. First, the major cultivation sects of Japan had joined hands to climb the mountain. Then, the Shentian sect had knocked on the door and forced them to abdicate. Then, Wang Yuanshan had died in Xueqi and the absolute love extinguishing formation was destroyed. And finally, the incident of Zi Yuan's apostasy, in which the sun and moon elixir had been stolen. If any one of these incidents were to occur in any other sect, then it would probably be capable of causing the sect to collapse and shatter into pieces, and it was even to the extent that the sect would be in danger of being annihilated. However, as the sect with the longest history in the Chinese cultivation world, the Zhengyi school's incense had never been cut off. It had a deep foundation and long tenacity. It was really incomparable to other sections. After several huge upheavals and twists and turns, the ancient giant of the Zhengyi school still appeared calm and composed as usual. The Taoist priests on the mountain got up early. They did their homework, recited scriptures, and patrolled the mountain. They were all busy with their own work. It was a busy scene in an orderly manner, and there were no signs of setbacks or fluctuations at all. At the entrance of the main peak of Mount Longhu, a young Taoist priest was sweeping the floor with a broom in his hand. He looked around with a sigh. Mount Longhu was filled with spiritual energy. It was one of the best grotto heavens in the world. Although he had to sweep the floor early in the morning, the fresh air he breathed in made him feel comfortable and happy. The little Taoist took a deep breath and stretched. Just as he was about to rest for a while, the Shurdi beside him scolded him. "Dao Jing, don't be lazy. Be careful, or I'll tell your master." The little Taoist named Dao Jing was shocked and said with a bitter face, "Shurdi Daoming, you don't have to be so diligent in tattling, do you? If you want to tattletale, why don't you tattletale shimmy?" The Taoist priest who was sweeping the floor with this little Taoist was the Taoist priest who had patrolled the mountain with Zhang Lufang. Although he had spoken fiercely and threatened Zhang Lufang that he would report her for leaving her post and disappearing from the world, how could he really report her? Not only was Zhang Lufang beautiful, but she also had a good personality. Although her mouth was a little fast, she was usually sweet and said nice things to everyone she met. Who on Mount Longhu didn't like her? The fact that Zhang Lufang had left her post without permission could be a big or small matter, but the key was that she was a criminal to begin with, and it just so happened that a series of major events happened on Mount Longhu. Her senior brother was also afraid that if he really reported her, he wouldn't be able to clean up the mess. If that happened, Zhang Lufang would end up like that big-nosed Li Sen and be expelled from the sect. That would be terrible. Therefore, this Taoist priest named Dao Ming was all talk and no action. He went back to complain to the brothers around him and did not continue. Early in the morning, he pinched his nose and came to help Zhang Lufang with the chores that were supposed to be done by her. There were hundreds of Taoist priests on Mount Longhu. These days, every second was an inch of gold, so everyone was immersed in cultivation. Therefore, no one noticed which Taoist priest had disappeared. In addition, everyone deliberately concealed this matter for Zhang Lufang. This kind of thing could not be concealed, so these Taoist priests knew that Zhang Lufang had disappeared. Only Zhang Ling and the other cultivators of the older generation did not know about this matter. But no matter what, the truth couldn't be contained. It would have been better if Dao Jing hadn't mentioned it. Once he mentioned it, Dao Ming's face was full of sorrow. He was full of anger and said, "Don't mention this B***starred girl. She is really wild. She slipped away without saying a word and let me do the rest for her. If she comes back I will." Before he could finish his words, Dao Jing suddenly pointed down the mountain and said in surprise, "Senior brother, look. It's junior sister. Junior sister is back." Dao Ming was stunned and looked in the direction of his finger. Sure enough, he saw a pretty and delightful little Taoist nun running along the mountain road. The two of them looked from afar and saw that Zhang Liufeng's expression was strange. She was in a hurry, as if she was being chased by thousands of pursuers. Dao Ming's face was filled with joy, but then he immediately put on a serious face and shouted, "Junior sister, do you still remember to come back?" Zhang Lufeng saw him at a glance and quickly said, "Senior brother Dao Ming, hurry up, go and call eldest uncle and my master out. Something's wrong, something big has happened." Dao Ming scolded, "Calm down. What do you look like now? What's going on?" When the Japanese cultivation world joined hands to go up the mountain, our Xueqi school did not panic. Now that the mystical silver fox has been destroyed, what's there to be so flustered about? Zhang Lufeng had already rushed up to him and said loudly, "Oh, look for yourself." As she said this, she pointed to the foot of the mountain behind her. Dao Ming and Dao Jing took a look and saw a row of buses winding along the road at the foot of the mountain, like a long dragon. After these buses stopped at the foot of Mount Longhu, many people got off. Most of them were young people in different clothes, like college students. They looked around excitedly and craned their necks. Some of these people shouted loudly, as if they were calling their friends, while others took pictures excitedly with their mobile phones or cameras. Dao Ming and Dao Jing looked at each other. Although Mount Longhu was a tourist attraction, they had never seen such a large group of tourists come here. It seemed that there were dozens of buses at the foot of the mountain. There might be more than 2,000 people getting off these buses. Dao Ming glared at Zhang Lufeng strangely and said, "Are you crazy? It's a good thing that so many tourists have come to Mount Longhu." Zhang Lufeng didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She stamped her feet and said, "Look carefully at the person standing at the front." The two Taoist priests took a closer look and saw that the person in the lead had an imposing appearance. Although they were far away, they could feel an extraordinary temperament coming towards them. They were all cultivators and had excellent eyesight. At a glance, they recognized that this person was none other than Li Yundong. Dao Ming and Dao Jing were stunned. Dao Jing was tongue-tied and said, Li Wudi? Why is he here? Isn't he dead?" Dao Ming stammered, Li, what is Li Wudi doing here? He brought so many people here. Does he want to visit the mountain or challenge the dojo?" Seeing that the two of them were even worse off than her, Zhang Lufeng said anxiously, "Stop talking. Hurry up and tell Xueqi and Master." Li Yundong's reputation was really frightening. He could already be called the #1 person in the cultivation world today. It was already a big deal for him to visit alone, but now he had so many people behind him. It was really frightening. Dao Ming, who had been calm and scolding Zhang Lufeng, could no longer hold on. He turned around and ran up the mountain. His footsteps were in a hurry, and he almost fell several times. Fortunately, he used both his hands and feet to prevent himself from falling to the ground in a mess. He ran all the way to the gate of the Taoist master's mansion and shouted, "Oh no, oh no!" Zhang Lufeng, who was following behind him, also shouted, someone come, something's wrong." As soon as the two of them shouted, even the Taoist priests who were cultivating stopped. After a while, the door of the backyard opened, and many Taoist priests came out. Zhang Ling came out with a livid face. Before she got close, she scolded from a distance, "B***starred, why are you crying and howling so early in the morning? Zhang Lufeng, where have you been these days? And Dao Ming, look at you. What do you look like? You look so flustered and embarrassed. What do you look like?" Dao Ming didn't have time to be embarrassed. He pointed behind him and stammered, Great. Master, uncle. Down the mountain." He was so nervous and frightened that he stuttered. Zhang Ling was also famous for her impatience. She said angrily, "What's down the mountain? Have you seen a ghost? Why are you so scared?" At this time, there were no tourists on Mount Longhu. The Taoist priests of Mount Longhu were all around. They all burst into laughter. Seeing this, Zhang Lufeng hurriedly said, "Auntie, Li Yundong is here." The laughter suddenly stopped. All the people who had been laughing were like roosters that had been strangled by their necks, and all their laughter was strangled. Zhang Ling's pupils instantly shrank. She said in surprise, "Li Yundong? He isn't he ill?" Everyone was also frightened and whispered to each other, "No way! Isn't Li Yundong dead?" "Yes, how did he come back to life?" "I know. It must be the sun and moon flowing elixir that Zi Yuan stole that saved Li Yundong." Zhang Ling quickly came to her senses. Even if she were a fool, she could guess what Li Yundong was going to do this time. Zhang Ling sneered and shouted angrily, Well, does Li Yundong want to take people away? A country has its laws, a family has its rules, and a sect has its dogma. Disciples of the Zhengyi school, can you tolerate an outsider coming to our Mount Longhu and acting recklessly? Although Li Yundong was powerful and famous, the disciples of the Zhengyi school were also proud and arrogant. Zhang Ling's words immediately stirred up their arrogance and blood. They shouted in unison, "No!" Zhang Ling waved her hand and led the disciples of the Zhengyi school down the mountain in a mighty manner. Zhang Ling raised her eyebrows and thought to herself, "I don't believe that you, Li Yundong, would dare to go against the world and behave atrociously here." She led the disciples of the Zhengyi school down the mountain. As soon as she arrived at the gate of the mountain, she saw a group of people rushing up. Zhang Ling took a closer look and saw that, in addition to Li Yundong, Su Chan, Zhou Qin, Lin Miao, and Wan Hongling, these people were all students and teachers carrying big and small bags. There were also many people wearing red hats standing in the crowd, holding a red flag in their hands that was fluttering in the wind. On it were a few golden words, Tiannan City Donghua Travel Agency 4-day tour to Mount Longhu. The aggressive disciples of the Zhengyi school were dumbfounded. They stared dumbfoundedly at the group of Tiannan University students rushing up the mountain in front of them. Their eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Damn, what the hell is going on? What are so many students doing? Li Yundong, what are you doing? Zhang Ling was tongue-tied and was about to speak when some students saw so many Taoist priests standing at the gate of the mountain. They all became excited and said, "Wow, look, it's Taoist priests." It's true. He's a genuine Taoist priest. Are they from the Wu-Tang sect? Idiots, the Wu-Tang sect is on Wu-Tang Mountain. This is Mount Longhu, so it must be the Longhu sect. The sect in Mount Longhu is called the Longhu sect? Then is the cartoon in Mount Longhu called ******? The students chattered non-stop, and the noise made Mount Longhu look like a pot of boiling water. Some of the more courageous students even rushed to the side of Zhang Ling and the other Taoist priests. Regardless of whether they agreed or not, they just minded their own business and took photos together. Zhang Lufeng was the most beautiful, which caused many people to exclaim. Many boys rushed to her and rushed to take photos with her. Even Zhou Ping and the others were not spared. Zhang Lufeng wanted to cry but had no tears. She finally squeezed out of the crowd and said to Zhang Ling pitifully, "Eldest aunt, what should we do now?" Zhang Ling's arms were wrapped around by two girls, and she looked like a prop. She wanted to explode, but she didn't know how to do it. In order to be polite to these ordinary students, she still had a stiff smile on her face. It was so dry that it looked like a layer of mud had been smeared over it. Although Zhang Ling had the ability to adapt quickly and was in charge of many affairs of the Zhengyi school, this was the first time she had encountered such a thing in her life. This group of students had obviously been encouraged by Li Yundong to come here in the name of tourism. As a tourist attraction, Mount Longhu obviously couldn't be refused. She couldn't beat them, talk to them, or scold them. Otherwise, with so many people spreading the news, the notoriety of the Zhengyi school and Mount Longhu would immediately spread throughout the internet. At that time, she would suffer even more losses. Zhang Ling felt a headache coming on. The corners of her eyes kept twitching, and she gritted her teeth in her heart and said, "Li Yundong, good. You actually played such a trick. Okay, I'll play with you." Chapter 951. The main peak of Mount Longhu was in a mess. The Taoist priests of the Xueqi school were ready to fight, but they didn't expect to encounter such a thing. Mount Longhu was also a famous tourist attraction in the country. Since it was an open attraction, those who came were naturally guests, and there was no reason to close the door to refuse guests. Li Yundong came to the foot of Mount Longhu with a large group of students, with a posture of, "I'm here for sightseeing. What can you do to me?" It really made these Taoist priests, young and old, stunned and not knowing whether to laugh or cry. It was as if two sides had agreed to play football. One side was cheated and was ready to play football, but the other side gave the first side a good beating. When the first side was ready to take revenge in the second set, the other side said with a straight face, "Sorry, I'm here to play football." Damn it! You can't be so shameless. You, Super Li, are really good at fighting. Whether you can win or not is another matter, but you can't deprive us of the right to fight, can you? You can't ignore our burning hearts, can you? Most importantly, this guy actually used innocent and clueless commoners as his meat shield to pave the way. His level of shamelessness was practically unparalleled in all the historical records in the world, from ancient times to modern times, Chinese to foreign countries. Li Yundong naturally knew that no matter how bold the disciples of the Xueqi school were, they wouldn't dare to do anything to these ordinary students. He walked up to Zhang Ling and the others with a smile. He didn't bow and greet them, but just said with a smile, "Zhenren Zhang, we meet again." Li Yundong walked up to Zhang Ling, and the students who had surrounded the Taoist priests to take pictures retreated with laughter, enjoying their proud work just now. As soon as Zhang Ling got out of trouble, she took a deep breath. She felt as if she had walked around hell. Her head was swollen and her eyes were full of anger. She gritted her teeth and said, "Li Yundong, what do you want to do?" Li Yundong laughed gently, but the corners of his eyes were full of slyness and pride. He said with a smile, "Do you still need to say? Of course, I'm bringing my classmates and teachers to Mount Longhu of the Xueqi school. Taoist Zhang. There are more than 2,000 people here. Up until now, Mount Longhu has never received such a large-scale tour group, right?" Zhang Ling almost blurted out an expletive, but when she saw all the curious eyes staring at her, she forcefully swallowed it back down. It was a good thing that she didn't blurt it out. Zhang Ling suppressed her anger and sneered, "Our Mount Longhu of Xueqi school has been glorious for a while. What are these people to us?" Li Yundong chuckled. "Really? That's good. I was afraid that if too many people came at once, you wouldn't be able to handle it." As he spoke, Li Yundong looked around. He saw that most of the Taoist priests of Mount Longhu were looking at him covetously, and only a few people were looking at him curiously and timidly. Li Yundong smiled and said to them, "Don't look at me like that. I'm here to promote your Xueqi school. If you receive me well this time, maybe there will be a lot of incense offerings." Li Yundong's words made many Taoist priests' hearts skip a beat. Although most of them were cultivators who paid attention to purity and had no special pursuit of material life, cultivation was, after all, the most expensive thing in the world. Money was needed everywhere in the Xueqi school. If such a large group of tourists really came to visit, they would be more than happy to welcome them. But the problem was, Li Yundong had brought such a large group of people. Was he really here to burn incense and visit, not to destroy the temple? No matter how Zhang Ling looked at Li Yundong, there was a deep evil in her eyes. She sneered and said, "More incense offerings? Thanks to you, you just need to play less tricks and everything will be fine. Don't think I don't know what you want to do? You want to save Zi Yuan, don't you?" Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat, but his face remained calm. He smiled and lowered his voice a little, saying, "Zhenren Zhang is really smart. You understood my intention at once. Zhenren Zhang, why don't you let Zi Yuan go and I'll take these students back? What do you think?" Zhang Ling laughed angrily and also lowered her voice, saying, "Li Yundong, I know that you are invincible in fighting and no one in the world is your opponent, but don't be presumptuous. Figure out where you are standing. This is Mount Longhu, the Xueqi school. Since the beginning of the Han Dynasty, countless masters have challenged our Xueqi school in the past 2,000 years. Countless sects have wanted to defeat us in Mount Longhu, but history has proved countless times that our Xueqi school has defeated strong enemies again and again, and Mount Longhu has stood firm again and again. I don't believe that you will be an exception." Li Yundong was not angry at Zhang Ling's tough reply. He just smiled and said, "Hey, Zhenren Zhang, don't be angry. Don't be angry. All the cultivators in the world are one family. Why do you have to get angry and provoke two tigers to fight? I came here with sincerity this time. I want to discuss it with you. If you don't agree, we can talk about it slowly. Zhang Ling sneered and said, "This matter is the internal affairs of our Xueqi school. You are an outsider. What is there to talk about? Moreover, Zi Yuan stole the sun and moon flowing elixir, which is an act of apostasy. It is absolutely intolerable, and there is absolutely nothing to talk about." Li Yundong seemed to have expected her to say this. He nodded, sighed, and said, "I see." He turned his head and made a gesture to Zhou Qin. Zhou Qin nodded and said a few words to the students around her. The students immediately turned around and said loudly, "Everyone, follow me. Let's go up the mountain together. Don't mess around. Don't make any noise. We'll line up to buy tickets later." These students had been waiting impatiently for a long time. At this time, they couldn't help but cheer and step forward one after another. The dark torrent began to slowly squirm. There were many disciples of the Xueqi school gathered together, but compared with these students, they were really dwarfed. They watched these students pass by them with very strange expressions on their faces. Any one of them had the strength to annihilate these defenseless students, but how could they really make a move? Each of these students was like tofu that had fallen into the ashes. They couldn't be blown away or hit. Zhang Ling seemed to have vaguely understood what Li Yundong wanted to do. She glanced at the black mass of Tiannan University students behind Li Yundong and sneered. "Just with them," Li Yundong said with a smile. "Zhenren Zhang, don't underestimate the enemy." Zhang Ling laughed and said, "Zhenren Li, you are too naive. With so many people coming to our Mount Longhu, how much income will it bring us? Be careful that you kill 3,000 enemies and lose 10,000 of your own." Li Yundong also laughed and said, "Zhenren Zhang, let's wait and see." The two of them looked at each other and laughed. Their laughter was hypocritical and fake. After Zhang Ling finished laughing, she turned around and flicked her sleeves. Her face immediately darkened. She sneered and said to Zhou Ping, who was always by her side, "Go, send someone to keep an eye on them. Don't let them mess around on the mountain." Zhou Ping said with a strange expression, "How? There are thousands of them." Zhang Ling said angrily, "Nonsense, can't we just keep an eye on the main attractions?" Zhou Ping said with a wry smile, "Master. Then we won't cultivate any more?" Zhang Ling was stunned for a moment, then gritted her teeth and said, "Let's hold on for one day and see what happens." Zhou Ping had no choice but to turn back and give her fellow disciples a wink. Then, she left with the students of Tiannan University. At this time, the students went up the mountain. Most of them were divided into more than a dozen square formations, led by more than a dozen tour guides, and walked toward Mount Longhu one after another. Zhang Ling looked at Li Yundong and the others covetously. If she found anything wrong, she would go forward. But after watching for a while, she saw that these students were all buying tickets and entering the door. She couldn't help but be surprised. "Is Li Yundong really here to give us money?" she thought. "The tickets are more than 200 yuan each. Even if it's a group purchase from a travel agency, it'll cost nearly 200 yuan. There are more than 2,000 people here. That's hundreds of thousands of yuan. Is Li Yundong so rich?" While she was wondering, she saw many students coming to the front gate of the Taoist master's mansion and pointing at a huge bronze tripod, as if asking what it was. The tour guide who followed them explained that it was a place to burn incense and worship the gods. After burning incense, one could make a wish, and it was very effective. When these students heard this, they were overjoyed and quickly asked for the price. When Zhang Ling heard this, she was also overjoyed. She kept winking at the Taoist priest nearby and thought to herself, Li Yundong, you came to me for me to kill. If I don't kill you, my surname is not Zhang." The Taoist priest next to her understood and also secretly hinted to the tour guide. It should be known that the world's tour guides were all unscrupulous. They all colluded with tourist attractions and other links to earn customers' money. When the tour guide saw the Taoist priest next to her winked, she immediately understood and showed 5 fingers. When these students saw this, they were shocked. What? 5,000? In a place like Mount Longhu, the ticket money was only a very small part of the income. A larger part of the income came from incense money. The amount of incense money could vary from tens to dozens of dollars to hundreds of thousands of dollars. Especially for the first incense in some famous temples, there were countless people who wanted to snatch it even if they had to break their heads to do so. In some places that were deeply religious, there were even bloody fights over the first incense. In the world, the richer and more powerful people were, the more religious they were, and the more they believed in these things. Therefore, they often spent a lot of money, and it became one of the main sources of income for a religion or a sect. The tour guide originally only wanted to trick the students into buying a 50 yuan incense stick. She did not expect these students to be so arrogant, asking for 5,000 yuan. She was so scared that she quickly waved her hands, indicating that it was not that much. But she did not expect that the students would immediately gasp and say, 50,000? Isn't that too much? So expensive? Immediately, a student beside her picked up his phone angrily, wanting to take a picture. So expensive? Take a picture and post it on Weibo. Zhang Ling was shocked. Although she did not usually come into contact with these modern things on the internet, she knew the power of public opinion. Zhang Ling quickly stepped forward and said, No, you misunderstood. This incense can't be so expensive. This incense is. She was just about to say that this incense was only 5 yuan, but before she could finish her words, she saw the students patting their chests in relief and saying, 500 yuan? I was scared to death. I was wondering why it was so expensive. Some students immediately shouted, 500 yuan is barely acceptable. Why don't we burn one incense stick for each person? Zhang Ling felt a little like she was riding a roller coaster. She had just been shocked, but now she couldn't help but be a little happy. One incense stick for each person? There were more than 2,000 people, so how much would it be if 500 incense sticks were burned? She was making a fortune. How much was the annual income of Mount Longhu? He had earned so much in one day, and that didn't even include other money. Even though Zhang Ling was quite powerful in the Xueqi school and had a high cultivation quotient, her heart was still alive. She kept sneering and saying, Li Yundong, I think this time you are pretending to be a stone and smashing your own foot. You have fattened us this time. Just as she was thinking, she suddenly saw a student turn around and take out a pack of incense from his backpack, then seriously light it up and insert it into the incense burner. Zhang Ling was dumbfounded and stammered. Why did you bring your own? The student said with a smile, Thanks to Li Yundong for reminding us. He prepared a bag for each of us. As he spoke, the other students also took out a bag of incense from their backpacks and lit it one after another. Zhang Ling was dumbfounded. She would never have thought that there would be people who would bring their own wine to eat and women to brothels. However, she had never seen anyone who would bring their own incense from thousands of miles away to burn their own incense. Chapter 952. At this moment, Zhang Ling suddenly had an urge to go berserk. She stood there for a long time without moving. She didn't know how long it had been until Zhang Lufang came over and spoke to her timidly. Only then did Zhang Ling react. When Zhang Ling came to her senses and took a closer look, she suddenly gasped. Wow, this incense burner is already full of incense sticks. Not a single F*king stick was bought here. They were all brought with them. How wicked! If the great ancestors of the three pure ones knew about this, they would be so angry that they would go crazy. The corners of Zhang Ling's eyes kept twitching, and she cursed in her heart. Li Yundong, how wicked are you to come up with such a wicked idea? Zhang Lufang looked at Zhang Ling cautiously. After waiting for most of the students to leave, she asked in a low voice that she already knew the answer to. Great aunt, whose idea was this? Was it Li Yundong? How could there be such a thing? It's too wicked. Zhang Liufang's little calculation could not be said to be not clever. Her words implied that she had completely removed herself from the blame and corrected her position. Auntie, I haven't been with Li Yundong these days. I have no idea what they are going to do. Even if I know, they are watching me and I can't send a message. Even if I have a mobile phone to send a message, there is no power. Even if there is power, it's... Oh, anyway, this has nothing to do with me. I'm on your side. I was born a member of the Xueqi school. If I die, then forget it. I want to live well. In short, this has nothing to do with me. It's all Li Yundong's fault. Zhang Ling didn't expect Zhang Lufang to have so many plans in an instant. She flew into a rage and finally couldn't help roaring. This is more than wicked. It's simply wicked. Zhang Lufang looked at Zhang Ling with a sad and sympathetic face and thought to herself, alas, Auntie is so angry that she's incoherent. Zhang Ling threw a tantrum on the spot for a while. After her anger subsided a little, she took a deep breath and laughed angrily again. Li Yundong, do you think you can force our Zhengyi school to submit like this? You're too naive. Earn less, earn less. At most, I won't earn your money. Let's see who can outlast the other. Zhang Lufang hurriedly nodded. Yes, yes, as the saying goes, poverty cannot be shaken, might cannot be subdued, riches and honor. Zhang Ling was so angry that she interrupted her and said, Bullshasterisk tea. Do you know how to talk? Is it appropriate to say that here? Zhang Lufang quickly covered her mouth with her hands and looked at Zhang Ling in horror. After a while, she put down her hands and said cautiously, in short, eldest aunt, this little bit of money is nothing to our Zhengyi school, right? If Li Yundong wants to use this to force us to submit, it would be the most ridiculous thing in the world, wouldn't it? Zhang Ling snorted angrily, as long as you know. Let's go. I'd like to see what other tricks Li Yundong has up his sleeves. Zhang Lufang nodded vigorously and agreed. Yes, yes, let's see what tricks he can play. She followed Zhang Ling step by step. After taking a few steps, she couldn't help but look back. Looking at the dense incense sticks in the incense burner, she thought to herself, ah, so much money. While she was sighing in her heart, she suddenly heard Zhang Ling shout angrily. Zhang Lufang, what are you muttering about? Zhang Lufang was shocked and didn't dare to look back again. She obediently followed Zhang Ling. The two of them arrived at the side hall of the Taoist master's mansion. Zhang Ling sat down cross-legged on a futon. She looked around and saw that she had sent Zhou Ping away, leaving only Zhang Lufang by her side. She pointed to the side and said, sit down and meditate with peace of mind. Zhang Lufang responded and carefully sat down next to him. She was about to run her qi to meditate when she heard noises coming from outside. Wasn't that right? There were more than 2,000 people here, and they were all hot-blooded university students. Boys and girls of this age were the most restless. Usually, they stayed in the ivory tower until lice grew all over their bodies. Now that they were out of the cage, they were like 2,000 monkeys on Mount Huagua. They wished that everyone could carry a gun and cause a revolution. As the saying goes, like general, like soldier. Although Li Yundong was not the nominal leader of this group of students, he was definitely their spiritual leader. He had come up with such an unprecedented bad idea, so naturally, these students couldn't be serious. They were all noisy, laughing and cursing, and their voices were so loud that Mount Longhu was about to jump up and down. The side hall where Zhang Ling was located was only one door away from these voices. How could Zhang Lufang be able to meditate when the noise was like waves? She only forced herself to calm down for a while, then couldn't help but listen attentively. She wanted to hear what the noise outside was about. Why were they so happy? Zhang Lufang had grown up on Mount Longhu, so she couldn't be more familiar with the flowers and grass here. She could even feel the way down the mountain with her eyes closed, so naturally, there was nothing new about it. However, almost none of these college students had been to this place before, so they were curious about everything. When they saw a stone, they would shout and make a fuss. Zhang Lufang felt as if she had swallowed 25 little mice in one breath because of the noise outside. She was stretching her neck to listen to the movement outside when she suddenly heard Zhang Ling scolding. Zhang Lufang, let him be strong. The cool breeze blows the hill. Let him be strong. The bright moon shines on the river. You should have read this poem by Zhenren Sanfeng, right? Zhang Lufang was so scared that she shrank her neck and whispered yes. Zhang Ling shouted. Why are you still like this? How did you practice kung fu? Zhang Lufang didn't dare to say anything else, so she closed her eyes again. However, no matter how hard she closed her eyes, she couldn't meditate. The noise outside was too noisy. There was nothing she could do. Cultivation was like this. The surrounding environment must be good, otherwise, it would be empty talk. Otherwise, for thousands of years, which great cultivator would cultivate in a busy city? Which great Zhenren would meditate in a prosperous place? Otherwise, why would cultivators look for the Taoist rite, the ancestral court, and find remote, quiet, deep mountains and forests full of spirit treasures. The reason was very simple. They were afraid of being noisy. More than 2,000 students were making a ruckus. It was so noisy that Zhang Lufang felt dizzy. From morning to afternoon, the noise at the entrance never stopped. Waves of people came and went, and groups of people came and went. It was like a carpet bombing, with no pause at all. It was not easy to endure until the sun went down, and these students gradually went down the mountain and left. Only then did the gate quiet down. Zhang Lufang had never been disturbed from morning to night in her life. After the students left, she still felt a buzzing in her ears, as if there were still lingering sounds. She rubbed her temples painfully with both hands and complained in her heart. But when she glanced at Zhang Ling, she found that Zhang Ling was also frowning and shaking her head, as if she wanted to clear the lingering sounds in her ears. After a long time, Zhang Ling's side hall was pushed open. Zhang Ling shouted nervously, "Who is it? What are you doing?" It was her disciple, Zhou Ping, who came in. Zhou Ping was shocked and said, "Master, it's me." Zhang Ling had been disturbed for a whole day. She looked calm on the surface, but deep down, she had already torn Li Yundong's body into pieces countless times. She had stayed up all day, and her nerves were a little abnormal. When she saw that it was Zhou Ping, she breathed a sigh of relief and said, "It's you. Come in. How is it? How is everything else?" There were 2 Taoist priests behind Zhou Ping. She and the 2 Taoist priests looked at each other, and one of them, who was slightly fatter, said in a low voice, "Auntie, this is today's account list. Please take a look." Zhang Ling rubbed her temples with one hand and took the list with the other. She glanced at it and suddenly laughed. "Not bad. There's actually a 6-figure profit?" Zhou Ping said in a low voice, "Master, a lot of it is ticket income, and some of it is food income." There was also a vegetarian cafeteria on Mount Longhu. Although it was vegetarian, it was much more expensive than many meat dishes. However, the students who came here to play didn't care about this. Some people just wanted to try something new, and they had spent a lot of money on it. Zhang Ling couldn't help laughing and said proudly, "Li Yundong, how can you be the immovable wisdom king? You are clearly the boy of wealth." Zhou Ping and the 2 Taoist priests behind her looked at each other again. Zhou Ping swallowed hard, handed over another list, and said, "Master, this is the list of losses." "Ha!" Zhang Ling was stunned and took a look. As soon as she saw it, Zhang Ling jumped 3 feet high and roared angrily, "What's going on with these 28 small incense burners being stolen? Also, what's going on with the other 31 walls being demolished?" Zhou Ping said with a tearless expression, "Master, some of the walls have been in disrepair for a long time. I don't know who dug out a brick from it, but it collapsed. As a result, many students picked up a brick and took it away, saying that they wanted to keep it as a souvenir. I couldn't stop them." Zhang Ling said angrily, "What about the incense burner? What's going on with the incense burner?" The slightly fat Taoist priest next to her carefully added, "Auntie, there are too many people who come to the temple to burn incense. We accidentally lost one. All the halls are the same, and we couldn't find it. We can't search them one by one, can we?" Zhang Ling was so angry that she felt dizzy. Seeing that the other Taoist priest seemed to want to say something, she immediately pointed at him and said angrily, "You, what do you want to say?" The Taoist priest shrank back and said timidly, "Great uncle, this list hasn't written yet. On the cultural relics, stone tablets, and ancient trees of our Xueqi school, there are 238 words written or engraved with a pen and a knife." When Zhang Ling heard the Taoist priest's words, she was so angry that she almost spat out a mouthful of blood. She rushed out quickly, but after a few steps, she stopped. Her heart was bleeding with hatred. These were the cultural relics and treasures of Mount Longhu. The last time it had been ruined like this was in the 70s. Zhang Ling was so angry that her vision turned dark and she almost fainted. At this time, the other Taoist priests outside also came to the door of the main hall and said behind her, "Auntie, it's too noisy today. I can't cultivate even if I want to." "That's right. It's the beginning of spring. Every second counts. Eldest Xueqi, I still want to take this opportunity to break through to the Jinshan phase. Now that this is happening, how can I cultivate?" Zhang Ling was annoyed by the noise. She shouted, "Stop arguing. Haven't they already gone down the mountain? It will be quiet at night. You can cultivate as you want. When everyone heard this, they also felt that it was reasonable and dispersed one after another. But as soon as they turned their heads, they suddenly heard a voice coming from the distance at the foot of the mountain. It was loud and clear, and it was clearly the amplified voice of a high-powered speaker. The voice was extremely emotional. Students of Tiannan University, today we are gathered at the foot of Mount Longhu. The starry sky has witnessed our friendship, and the bonfire has witnessed our youth. Next, let us welcome Zhang Guafang from the Department of Finance of Class 3 of the freshman year to bring us a classic old song. Let us sing and dance to our heart's content. When these Taoist priests heard this, they all burst into an uproar. What? After the noise during the day, it still won't stop at night? Also, who the hell wrote this line? Can you be any more melodramatic? I'm going to throw up just listening to it. Zhang Ling and the other Taoist priests did not dare to fly. They all jumped onto the roof beams of the side hall and looked down. Sure enough, there were bonfires and tents at the foot of the mountain, and a burst of noise came over them. Zhang Ling's eyes were fixed, and the veins on her forehead were throbbing. She clenched her fists so hard that they made cracking sounds. She took a deep breath and was about to speak when she heard an extremely distorted male voice shouting loudly and excitedly, "Sister, you sit at the bow. I'll walk on the shore." When these Taoist priests and nuns heard this, they almost fell off the roof, tears streaming down their faces. What the hell, trackers love? You're still King college students. Do you dare to sing a more fashionable song? It's fine if the song is not fashionable, but do you dare to sing the correct tune? It's fine if the tune is not correct, but do you dare to sing a woman's voice that is not pretentious? It's fine if you are a man singing a woman's voice, but do you dare to sing the lyrics correctly? That is a lovey-dovey rope swaying leisurely, not a lovey-dovey bed swaying leisurely. That is a little sister sitting at the bow of the boat, not a little sister sitting at the head of the bed. What kind of King college students are these? Singing in such a vulgar manner? Patriarchs of the Three Pure Ones, Great Emperor Tai Hao, please show some mercy and let the host who spoke so cliché come back. I can't hold it anymore. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.